The Jeffrey Epstein matter. As I wrote in The Atlantic last night, this comes at the worst possible moment for this president, who just saw his party lose bigly in last week's elections. We just went through it. His poll numbers have really suffered. There's some real warning signs for the economy. His tariffs seem in jeopardy before the Supreme Court. The list goes on. And now suddenly it's the story he just can't shake. And it seems like one issue, one of the very few issues in which Republicans are willing to defy him.
Yeah, I mean, Epstein it's like this kind of gnawing ache that he's had to deal with. And you're right, it does come at a bad time for him for a few reasons. One, he's kind of in the low range of his approvals. I mean, he's always been kind of maybe 36 to 48 has been his range when he's been president. And, you know, he spent a fair amount of time up in the mid 40s. But it's been sort of a precipitous drop in the last few months. And, you know, those last numbers are pretty dicey for him. And you're right. I mean, the Epstein story is not the kind of thing that, one, is going away easily, and two, there is a drip, drip, drip quality to this, both in terms of the revelations that are coming out, the changing of the stories that you're hearing from the White House. I mean, some days they're defending they're obfuscating in different ways, and certainly the Republicans in the House and Senate, who have been pretty much operating or sort of chanting from the same hymnal in defense of him, really they break in all directions on Epstein. So it's kind of an awkward story for him, and it keeps going and going and going. And it also, on the heels of the shutdown, which seemed to really sort of, have some, ignite some divisions within the Democratic Party, this sort of has covered up for it. And it's sort of, he's back on the defensive. And obviously going into the holidays, it's not a good story for him.
No, and the polling shows, Rev, that he's underwater on the economy, significantly so. And J.D. Vance last night gave an interview to Fox in which he basically passed the buck, blamed the Biden administration, even though Trump has been in office now for nearly a year, still blamed the Biden administration, returned to old hobby horse of blaming migrants for housing. I mean, a lot of it's sort of nonsensical answers. And it's really striking to me. It seems like even though the voters really delivered a verdict to Republicans last week, hey, you're not doing enough on prices, you're not doing enough on affordability, it seems like the crew in the White House doesn't really have a plan.
It seems like they don't have a plan, and they don't have a solid reaction to the vote that came overwhelmingly against them last Tuesday. You would think they would have said, this is a wake-up call, maybe there's a message here, and be humble and then come back another way. They're arrogant, like it didn't happen. And then you're going to blame it on Biden? Well, you were the one that said day one you were going to do A, B, C, D. You knew Biden was on his way out then anyway. So why did you make those commitments? And then on top of that, you have these Epstein emails that people had never seen, that clearly infers that he had something on the president, or the president knew something. And even the Christian right has a problem. I mean, they gave a pass on the tape where he said he was going to grab a woman's privates, or what you could do. They gave a pass on that. But now you're talking about children. And now you're talking about their kids. And now you're talking about how right-wingers got to go home and look at their wives and say, I condone that. Even if he didn't participate, if he had knowledge and did nothing about it, it's hard for them to swallow that.
And Molly, we talked a lot in the last week or so about the Democrats, those 8 senators, deciding to vote to reopen the government. There was a lot of consternation. Some Democrats really disagreed with that. And certainly I heard from a number who were like, look, we've got momentum right now. Why are you doing this? And this is going to damage our enthusiasm. Well, the events of the last couple of days have sort of reignited that enthusiasm. Yeah. And they're doing, Democrats, it seems to me, and let's hear what you think, doing the right thing by largely kind of getting out of the way a little bit of some of this stuff, because the Epstein matter, obviously it's a human tragic story. We should never lose sight of the victims there. But in terms of a political story, it's one President Trump is just wearing, and it's dragging him down.
Yeah, look, the way these emails were released and the way oversight has handled this, and including the ranking member on oversight, Robert Garcia, has been really seamless. Like, the information is out there. It is, and again, we can never lose sight of the fact that these are children. These are now women whose lives have been completely destroyed, one of whom committed suicide. I mean, just the sort of darkest human tragedy. But the information has gotten out there, and there's so much of it, and it's so damning, and every which way you look at it, and it's just thousands of emails. And I do think that that was handled extremely well. And again, like, Donald Trump has a base that has been, like, you know, has long believed, or at least a section of the base has long believed in QAnon and Pizzagate and these kind of conspiracy theories. So here are emails where you don't even have to thread the needle.
Yeah, you really don't. And, you know, Mark Leibovich, you look at everything that's going right now. I mean, when it rains, it pours, and it's really pouring politically on the White House right now. You can look at the 36% approval rating of the latest AP poll. Right track, wrong track, sitting around 33%. Only 1 in 3 Americans think the country's going in the right direction. 2 out of 3 think the country's going in the wrong direction. And here's this AP approval poll, 62% disapproving. This is record lows for the president in this term, and it's approaching his record lows for the last term. You also look at other polls showing only 33% of Americans agree with how the president is running the federal government. Only 33% of Americans agree on how the president is running the economy. Only 34%. Hello, Democrats. Pay attention, Democrats. Only 34% of Americans agree with the president and how he's running health care. And he's even 15 percentage points upside down on immigration because, again, the heinous scenes that we're seeing of children once again being ripped from their mother's arms, teachers being ripped out of schools that they're teaching. And all of this is a toxic mix. And then you add on top of it the Epstein issues, and it feeds into something that you wrote about a couple of days ago. And you actually wrote about this before the latest news broke on Jeffrey Epstein. And that's talking about Donald Trump, a lamer duck than ever. And you write in part this: beyond the undertones of lost influence, being a lame duck can also suggest a president distracted, disengaged, but biding time. But lame duck also carries with it connotations of diminishing cachet relating to a leader's lost status and creeping powerlessness. Trump and his allies have worked to foster a sense of unquestioned authority and permanence, and they're very successful doing that. Yet Trump has looked much less daunting and invincible in recent days, and we can talk about all of the things that he's done, but he didn't go out, Mark, didn't go out and campaign for these candidates. He didn't campaign for the big, bold, beautiful bill or whatever they called it. And a lot of Republicans right now, they're just treating him differently. I mean, you talked about him going up and ordering Republicans to kill the filibuster. John Thune the next day said, that ain't happening. And you said even one senator laughed out loud at him.
Yeah, Mike Rounds did, North Dakota, South Dakota, one of the Dakotas did. I mean, I do think what's interesting is that the kryptonite Trump would have is any lost influence with Republicans. I mean, I think he has always, I mean, his numbers, like I said before, have fluctuated. I mean, 74% for Republicans approval is high, but it's not that high. I mean, we're talking about pretty much almost a quarter of Republican supporters sort of falling away from him. And that's sort of the base for him. I mean, that's what has always been what has sort of sustained him even in precarious times like this. And when that starts falling away, you know, Republicans sort of see that, and they know that they have a permission structure to disagree with him, to not do what he says. And that's sort of what he was accustomed to, certainly for the first year of this presidency. But when that goes away, he becomes a lamer duck. And I think that's what we've seen. Really, a benchmark for this was the elections last week. And as you said, I mean, the Epstein stuff, which happened in the last couple of days, has, I think, really reasserted that as something that isn't going to get even better any quickly for the president.
Well, not even in Mike Rounds' home state of South Dakota.
Oh, I'm sorry. Yeah, apologies. Yeah.
No, well, you had the Dakotas right.
I did.
So. This is true. Ed Rogers, sort of, you know, his power broker in Washington, D.C., a Republican guy who, along with Haley, have, you know, they've been just part of the Washington Republican scene for a very, very long time. Ed Rogers told you that Donald Trump would use that sort of third-term threat. Third-term constitutional scholars would call it a scam. Use that in term to push off what he called lame duckedness, which is, you and I both know, that is a term in Alabama. But it is interesting that when he said, no, I can't run for a third term, Mike Johnson said, no, he can't run for a third term. Even Amy Coney Barrett said the same. Well, there's a constitutional amendment. He can't run for a third term. There's been that sort of growing sense that, yes, Donald Trump will not be in the White House forever. And Republicans seem to be starting to worry about their own futures.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, here's the thing about that. I mean, the third term gamut is kind of a joke. I mean, it's constitutionally a non-starter. But as long as Donald Trump says it, I mean, Republicans in the House and Senate or anyone who has to get elected has to kind of take it seriously, because if they are seen as not taking it seriously, as sort of being disrespectful to that idea, however absurd it might be, Donald Trump's going to notice, and he's going to sort of take it as an affront, and that's the kind of thing that can get them in trouble. So, I mean, in a way, he's created this precedent for no matter what he says, no matter what possibility he floats out there, it has to be given, you know, some sort of serious credence, at least publicly, even if these Republicans don't know. So it's you know, it's a weird dance he has, but he's obviously not saying it as much, and no one's taking it seriously anymore.
Well, and let's be very clear here, Jonathan Lemire, there still are a lot of Republicans that fear Donald Trump and are going to do everything they can to stay on his good side.
Oh, no question. The number of those who will dare defy him, that's going to be the exception rather than the rule. And that will be so even as if he moves further and further into lame duckedness or whatever that was. But, Mark, let's talk, though, about how in some ways that's going to potentially hamstring the Republican Party. They're going to still be sort of, you know, in fealty to Trump. You know, there's not going to be that sort of natural evolution we see in the back half of a president's second term, where it's like, okay, let's start thinking about who's next. And we're already seeing some jockeying here, quiet jockeying, to your point. You don't want to anger the president, whether it's J.D. Vance or Marco Rubio, or some have speculated Marjorie Taylor Greene, or maybe a Trump family member. There's going to be a lot of people eyeing 2028, assuming the president indeed gives up power. But if he is going to clearly be a domineering figure throughout until January 19th, 2029, that'll make it hard in some ways for the Republican Party to figure out what's next and who should lead them.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's a very delicate sort of tightrope that people like Vance and Rubio and whoever might want to run in 2028, you know, will have to walk, because, you know, Trump might reluctantly have to give up power, but he's not going to give up the spotlight. I mean, that's going to be something he is going to be loath to do. And I can see him, you know, in a couple of years, you know, all the press coverage goes to Iowa, wherever the candidates are, him doing everything possible to sort of like kind of wrest it back to whatever he is doing. But also, you know, probably demanding complete respect and almost reverence from the candidates about the stuff he's done, when in fact they're going to want to be distancing themselves. And again, I mean, if this were a normal president, they would sort of respect the normal ebbs and flows of how 8 years plays out. And, you know, but Trump's not the type who's going to be grooming his successor or going to be spending a lot of time thinking about, quote, the next generation of Republicans. I mean, that's not his speed. I mean, he wants to be seen as like the be-all and end-all and permanent figure of the Republican Party, and that's not going to go away anytime soon.
That's not his speed. An understatement, to be sure. The new piece online now. Staff writer at The Atlantic, Mark Leibovich-Lebo, thank you as always. Coming up here on
Affordable Care Act tax credits drive down the high cost of living or make life better for the American people. Donald Trump and his folks have spent this week pressuring Republicans not to back the effort to release these Jeffrey Epstein files to the American people.
Now, this week, Republican Congressman Tim Burchett, once it was clear that the discharge petition would get enough votes, Tim Burchett tried to actually get a vote on the House floor this week. And through House procedures, apparently it would have required leadership on both sides to sign on. House Speaker Mike Johnson says you wouldn't sign on to having a vote this week. Why not?
Yeah, that's actually inaccurate. it appears to me Mike Johnson didn't reach out. He spent 7 weeks stopping Representative Adelita Grijalva from being sworn in. And the reason why they were on vacation, a taxpayer-funded vacation for 7 weeks, is because they had no answers for the American people on the health care crisis that Republicans have created, and they were unwilling to swear in Representative Adelita Grijalva because they knew she would be the 218th signature to trigger this up or down vote. So I have no idea what Mike Johnson is talking about.
It is interesting to me that as we're talking about this, you keep on turning the discussion back to health care and affordability. What risks are there, do you think, for Democrats in spending too much time on Epstein as opposed to these bread and butter, kitchen table issues for the American people?
Well, we have to focus on a variety of different issues that we know are important to the American people. And the American people deserve better than the extremism that has been unleashed on them from day one of this presidency. And it certainly is the case that we're going to continue to focus on driving down the high cost of living in this country. America is far too expensive. The American people all across the country have made that clear repeatedly. Housing costs too high, grocery costs too high, child care costs too high, electricity bills through the roof, and of course, health care premiums about to skyrocket for tens of millions of Americans because of Republican inaction. But at the same period of time, we've made clear we also need to address the rampant corruption that we see in Washington, D.C. coming out of the Trump administration and enabled repeatedly by Donald Trump's sycophants in the House Republican Conference. And as part of that, transparency, sunlight, of course, is the best disinfectant. And we've maintained from the very beginning that the American people just deserve the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth as it relates to the Epstein Files that Donald Trump and his minions made a big deal about for years, but now all of a sudden that they're in office, they're trying to bury this information.
The government obviously now open. It had been shut down for some time. Democrats trying to get an extension of the Obamacare subsidies. When this continuing resolution runs out at the end of January, if there is not an extension of the Obamacare subsidies, what do you want Democrats to do? More importantly, what do you want, I suppose, the Senate to do?
Well, let's take one step at a time. The Affordable Care Act tax credits are scheduled to lapse on December 31st. And so we have about 45 days to get this done. House Democrats have introduced legislation to extend the Affordable Care Act tax credits for 3 years to provide working class Americans, middle class Americans, and everyday Americans the certainty that they need, that they'll be able to actually go see a doctor when they need to see one for themselves, their families, or their children. In an environment where Republicans have launched an all-out assault on the health care of the American people, the largest cut to Medicaid in American history. Hospitals and nursing homes and community-based health centers are closing all throughout America. Now they refuse to extend the Affordable Care Act tax credits, John. So we've got to work on this issue over the next 45 days, and we're going to continue to press the case.
And if you don't succeed?
Well, the appropriations process is going to proceed on a separate track, and that's being led, of course, by our appropriators, Rosa DeLauro on the House Democratic side, who's doing a great job, working with our Senate colleagues. And we're going to try to enact bipartisan spending agreements that actually meet the needs of the American people, focused on improving their quality of life and, of course, driving down the high cost of living to deal with the Trump affordability crisis that exists in America right now.
I mean, you know politics. You've been in it for a while, and you know this is the type of question that does get asked after a shutdown like this. Who won the shutdown?
Well, the American people lost because Republicans made a decision intentionally. They control the House, the Senate, and the presidency, that they'd rather shut the government down than actually provide affordable health care to everyday Americans all across the country, including in the states that are going to be most affected, which happen to be states like West Virginia, Wyoming, Alaska, Mississippi, Tennessee, Texas, South Carolina, Alabama, North Dakota, and South Dakota. Those are the 10 states most affected by the failure to extend the Affordable Care Act tax credits. And Republicans have been able to do everything else, including finding $40 billion to bail out Argentina, but unwilling to find a dime to actually provide affordable health care to everyday Americans. And so hopefully they'll adopt a different approach. And we're going to continue to press the case on these core issues of making life better for everyday Americans in a country that is far too expensive, far too many people struggling to live paycheck to paycheck. They can't thrive and can barely survive. This should not be the case in the wealthiest country in the history of the world.
House Minority Leader Hakeem Jeffries, we do appreciate your time this morning. Thank you. Omar?
All right, a bizarre bus ride. A driver denies entry to a passenger looking to board with an expired bus pass, but then carefully drove around several passengers. So, what is the problem? Well, the bus was hijacked. So, we're going to explain what exactly happened there. And how do you feel about naked snacks? No, not like that. Maybe like that. What's behind the new Naked Cheeto and Doritos? You'll find out coming up. Stay with us.
I wish I loved my smile.
I wish I could get implants.
I wish money wasn't so tight.
I wish I can justify the cost.
I wish my insurance could save me more on dental implants.
See what it can do at ClearChoice. Show us your insurance card and save $5,000 on fixed full double arch implants. That's insurance assurance on a smile that's built for life. Schedule your free consultation today.
When it's time to start your business, it's time for Shopify. Designed with easy to customize themes, sell everywhere people shop, and never miss a sale with the world's best converting checkout. See why millions of businesses sell with Shopify. Start your free trial today.
It's the final game, folks. This one wins the series. Struck out with the cheap seats? Important things aren't worth compromising. At Farmers, we offer both quality insurance and great savings. Here, take mine.
We are farmers. Bum, 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 bum.
This is the Tempur-Pedic Adapt mattress, and we designed it to help make aches and pains a thing of the past, because our most advanced, infinitely adaptable Tempur material eases your pressure points inch by inch and molecule by molecule in a way that no other mattress can. All night, every night. During the Tempur-Pedic Black Friday event, save up to $500 on select adjustable mattress sets and $50 off select pillow sets. Shop now at TempurPedic.com.
Are you sure? You tend to exaggerate.
Go ahead. Call him yourself.
Thank you for calling Aetna. How can I help you?
Do you really have Medicare plans that cover dental, vision, and hearing?
Yes, all three. Plus, we have plans that include a monthly allowance for certain over-the-counter products.
Really?
That's right. Aetna also has Medicare Advantage plans with a $0 monthly plan premium.
Oh, I like that.
Don't wait. Call 1-888-65-AETNA to find an Aetna Medicare Advantage plan that meets your unique needs.
Wake up! We got pain to relieve by morning. Ice, hot, lavender! Icy hot, nighttime recovery. You're so back.
You've got the magic touch. It makes me glow so much.
If you misplaced your card, slide to the right and the card's locked. The Chase mobile app has card lock. Locked, unlocked, locked, unlocked. And it has encryption technology to help you keep your data safe. Cool, right? That's peace of mind from Chase. Make more of what's yours.
Not again.
Your cold is coming! Your cold is coming!
Thanks, Revere.
We really need to keep Zycam in the house.
Only if you want to shorten your cold. When you feel a cold coming, shorten it with Zycam.
Think you need a new roof? Think again and save thousands. We'll help you put off the high cost of a roof replacement for at least 5 years.
Or 10.
Or sometimes even 15.
We're America's most trusted roofer because we always try to save your roof rather than repair.
With 300 gigabytes of data, have the documents from the Epstein estate. That seems like a fundamental source of documents, but they didn't have those. What else is missing?
Why do you think? What possible explanation could there be? Would there be any explanation that would satisfy you?
I don't understand it. And I certainly don't understand it because if I was Todd Blanche, I would want to be as prepared as possible in order to go talk to Ghislaine Maxwell as I did. And he didn't even have all the relevant documents, many relevant documents, which doesn't make any sense to me at all.
On the subject of timely investigation, in 2023, you wrote a letter. This is 2023. This is back in the previous administration, just so people understand that there is necessarily no partisan politics here. You wrote a letter calling for the FBI, the DOJ, and the Attorney General to investigate why, after Maria Farmer reported Jeffrey Epstein's crimes to the FBI decades ago, they failed, in your words, to timely investigate. And the Department of Justice responded to you saying they cannot comment due to the confidentiality, yet deem the matter addressed. So what does that say to you about accountability in this case?
This has been a tremendous frustration. We have been trying for several years to get information from the government. Some of those 300 gigabytes of data, try to figure out why, when Maria Farmer in 1996 came forward and reported Jeffrey Epstein and Ghislaine Maxwell's crimes to the United States, to the FBI, what did they do? Absolutely nothing. This has been a very frustrating process. We wrote a letter. We have written several letters. We've made a FOIA request, several FOIA requests. And in response, they told us that they would get back to us in November 2027.
November 2027?
So we thought we had November 2027.
When
it's
these
crazy.
emails,
I don't understand.
When these emails were released, Donald Trump's name was in them, and these are Jeffrey Epstein's words. Obviously, they weren't addressed to President Trump, but Ghislaine Maxwell and Jeffrey Epstein were talking about Donald Trump. How surprised were you to see his name in there?
I am not surprised. Having talked to many different survivors, I am not surprised. It seems certainly Maria Farmer met him. One of the first times she met Jeffrey Epstein, she met Donald Trump. And it is certainly well reported that they were very close friends for many, many years.
All right, so there is this vote in the House of Representatives next week. This is just one step. I mean, just because the House will vote to release the files doesn't mean they'll be released. But how important is it to you, and how important is it to the survivors to have this vote?
It is very, very important. The survivors have been repeatedly, hopeful and then had their hopes dashed. Hopeful and had their hopes dashed. Hopeful when President Trump, for example, said, "I will release the files," and had their hopes dashed. So we are very hopeful again, and the survivors are really, really looking carefully at this. And we urge all of the lawmakers to look at this really seriously and really check their consciences and talk to their constituents and release the files. It's a simple process. Release the files.
All right, Jennifer Freeman, great to speak with you this morning. Thank you so much for your time. We do have some breaking news, new information about the Georgia case involving Donald Trump. Details just ahead.
I'm Ben Wiedemann in Rome, and this is CNN.
This moment, story time for Sarah. It means everything to them and to all of us. At Evernorth, we make complex care journeys simpler with comprehensive coordinated care for better patient outcomes. Now, Sarah's grandma doesn't spend all day at the infusion center. She gets her treatment at home with Evernorth's specialty pharmacy, Accredo. So Sarah never misses story time. Evernorth Specialty Services, because every moment counts.
Imagine a world where no child dies of cancer. That's what drives St. Jude Children's Research Hospital.
Thanks to our breakthroughs, 4 out of 5 children in the U.S. will survive childhood cancer today.
St. Jude won't stop until no child dies of cancer.
And families never receive a bill from St. Jude, so parents can focus on helping their child live.
Help St. Jude find more cures for more children. Donate now at stjude.org.
When you have a Humana Medicare Advantage plan, there's no telling where it can take you. That's because with a Medicare Advantage plan, you get more benefits and more coverage than with Original Medicare alone. So go to the dentist, eye doctor, or get coverage toward hearing aids, because all Humana Medicare Advantage plans have dental, vision, and hearing coverage. Or go to the provider you choose with access to our multiple large plan networks of doctors, hospitals, and pharmacies. And go even farther with worldwide coverage for emergency and urgent care when you travel. At Humana, our licensed sales agents will help you enroll in a Medicare Advantage plan that takes you where you want to go, with plan options that offer the flexibility to get just what you need. Or choose a plan with built-in savings. Because most Humana plans have a $0 or low monthly plan premium. Plus, get $0 copays on hundreds of prescriptions and $0 copays for in-network preventive services. And unlike original Medicare, every Humana Medicare Advantage plan is backed by maximum out-of-pocket protection. So your covered medical costs, including doctor visits and emergency care, will never go above a maximum out-of-pocket amount that you know beforehand. With Humana Medicare Advantage plans, you get the benefits of original Medicare Parts A and B. Plus, all plans also include dental, vision, and hearing. And with a Medicare Advantage prescription drug plan, you'll also get Part D prescription drug coverage, all in one convenient plan. Get the value, choice, and coverage you want with your Humana Medicare Advantage plan. Call now before the annual enrollment period ends December 7th. Our licensed sales agents can help you choose the right plan for you and enroll over the phone. Humana, a more human way to healthcare.
Hi, Grandma. I played baseball today.
Oh, that's great.
What position did you play?
First base.
That's what Grandpa used to play.
When our hearing wouldn't allow us to use a regular phone, it made us feel isolated.
It became difficult to communicate with our friends and family.
Clear Captions was an easy solution for us.
Clear Captions provides captions on a phone like captioning on your TV, so you can see what the caller is saying live as they say it.
Making it easy to understand and respond immediately.
There is no insurance or Medicare required. Clear Captions service is provided at no cost to you through a federally funded program. We deliver, install, and train you on how to use your phone, all at no cost to you.
Give your loved ones the independence and connection they deserve.
Call now to see if you qualify to get a Clear Captions phone.
Willis had been removed by the courts. He says, this morning, an administrative order appointing me to the case of State of Georgia v. Donald J. Trump was filed with the clerk of the Superior Court of Fulton County. The filing of this appointment reflects my inability to secure another conflict prosecutor to assume responsibility for this case. Several prosecutors were contacted, and while all were respectful and professional, each declined the appointment. Out of respect for their privacy and professional discretion, I will not identify those prosecutors or disclose their reasons for declining. So that means they couldn't find anyone to prosecute Donald Trump, and so now the prosecutor is the only one left, the one that was overseeing the selection process, Peter Skandalakis. But this case against Donald Trump and others related to the 2020 election in Fulton County, Georgia, it is alive. It is a criminal case, and Donald Trump is still a criminal defendant.
A lot of people doing catch-up on exactly what came through in that Fani Willis saga prior to this. Caitlin Polance, appreciate you catching us up. John?
All right, new this morning, actor James Van Der Beek is auctioning off memorabilia from his career to help pay for cancer treatment. He's selling a total of 5 items, including his flannel shirt from Dawson's Creek and the necklace his character Dawson gave Joey for prom. He says 100% of the proceeds will pay for his treatment as he battles stage 3 colorectal cancer. We certainly wish him the best. A bizarre bus ride for some Canadians. A driver left his bus at a terminal in Ontario taking a break. Police say then another man boarded the bus and just drove off. The bus carried passengers for about 15 minutes. Police say the guy actually sort of did the job as he was driving, even insisting that a passenger with an expired pass pay the fare. Ultimately, police did take the driver into custody. So some new versions of Doritos and Cheetos. Parent company PepsiCo is launching new versions that they say are without artificial flavors or dyes. The new versions are called Simply Naked. I don't know which ones are the real or the ones with the dyes there. The company says they will still taste the same, just without the bright orange dust. I mean, what's the point then if you can't get it on your fingers? The original versions will still be available. Omar?
Yeah, what is the point? All right, that's a conversation for a different time. But new this morning, the third movie in the Now You See Me franchise, Now You 3 Me, hits theaters today.
In the world of magic, everything that disappears.
Enforcement, but attorneys say not so fast. The new questions being raised about Blanche's interview with convicted sex trafficker Ghislaine Maxwell. Plus, another multi-million-dollar mafia betting ring busted, this time involving college athletes. We're going to speak to the Attorney General of New Jersey. And then later, another Trump critic accused of mortgage fraud, what Congressman Eric Swalwell is saying about potentially dealing with the Justice Department.
Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth announcing a new mission aimed at, quote, narco-terrorists. We're taking a closer look at what's now being called Operation Southern Spear and what this means for rising tensions with Venezuela. Plus, deadly Russian strikes pound Kyiv overnight. The Russians claiming that Ukraine was planning to assassinate a high-ranking Kremlin official will be joined by the Ukrainian ambassador to the United States. And landmark mission to Mars. The feat Blue Origin just accomplished and the message it's sending to rival SpaceX. Welcome to our viewers here in the United States and around the world. I'm Wolf Blitzer with Pamela Brown, and you're in the Situation Room.
This is CNN Breaking News.
There's breaking news just coming into the Situation Room right now. The Georgia election interference case against President Trump and others in their effort to overturn the 2020 presidential election results will continue, but with a new prosecutor. This comes after Fulton County Attorney Fani Willis was previously removed from the case. Let's go live right now to CNN crime and justice correspondent Caitlin Polantz. She's got all the breaking details. Caitlin.
Wolf, a criminal case against President Donald Trump is alive again with a new prosecutor. This is the case in the state of Georgia in Fulton County around the 2020 election, Donald Trump's efforts there, and an alleged conspiracy that he led or is alleged to have led with top officials, including Rudy Giuliani, advisors on his campaign, as well as many people in that state who acted as fake electors. This is a case that had been charged 2 years ago and had been essentially on ice, in limbo. It was not moving forward because the prosecutor, Fani Willis, she had been removed from it earlier by a state court. However, there was a deadline given by a judge to find another prosecutor, and indeed one has shown up. It is the person that was charged with trying to figure out who was going to prosecute this case. I want to read a little about that prosecutor now, what he is thinking. His name is Peter Skandalakis. He says, the decision to assume responsibility for this matter was reached only after careful and deliberate consideration. While it would have been simple to allow the prior judge's deadline to lapse or to inform the court that no conflict prosecutor could be secured, thereby allowing the case to be dismissed for want of prosecution, I did not believe that to be the right course of action. The public has a legitimate interest in the outcome of this case. Accordingly, it is important that someone make an informed and transparent determination about how best to proceed. I made the decision to assign the case to myself. So Peter Skandalakis saying he's going to decide what to do with this indictment of Donald Trump and others in the state of Georgia, whether to push it forward. He says already he's looked at many of the documents in this case, witness statements, bankers' boxes worth of evidence that had already been collected by prosecutors, and he is going to determine what else to do here and what proceedings might be going forward. However, Wolf, Donald Trump's attorney in this case, the defense counsel Stephen Sadow, he says this politically charged prosecution has to come to an end. We remain confident that a fair and impartial review will lead to a dismissal of the case against President Trump. Wolf?
All right, Caitlin Polantz with the breaking news. Thank you very, very much.
All right, joining us now is CNN legal analyst and former federal prosecutor Elliot Williams. How significant is this?
It is significant in that, we have to put our hats back on to a couple of years ago. Remember, there were a series of prosecutions against then former president, now current President Trump, both at the state and federal level. One of them was in Georgia, and as Caitlin had talked about, the prosecutor, Fani Willis, had been removed from the case. Well, the judge had said the case, or the appeals court had said the case can be revived if a new prosecutor comes on. That case is now revived, and so once again, we are in the world of some percolating prosecution being brought against President Trump.
And Elliot, remind our viewers why Fani Willis is no longer prosecuting this case.
Right. She was prosecuting the case because of a relationship she had with a lead investigator or prosecutor on the case. Now, the trial judge who'd looked at the matter had said that while the relationship itself was not improper, there was at least an appearance of let's call it impartiality or impropriety that at least cast enough doubt on the case. It could still proceed, but look, there's a cloud over it. The appeals court then looked at it and said no, just to restore and maintain faith in the system, she should not prosecute this case. But again, it can proceed if someone else takes the case on, and that's where we are today.
But the bottom line is, and just to take a step back, you have the President of the United States as a criminal defendant in this case.
Yes.
I mean,
now, and there's the really important thing here, which is that this is an investigation or prosecution at the state level. All the stuff that people have heard about pardons for people connected with January 6th or Supreme Court rulings with respect to the president may not apply at the state level. I say may. That is a very important word, because anytime you are talking about the investigation or prosecution of the president of the United States, it's an uncharted world, and we just don't know quite what will happen. But again, state prosecutions aren't touched by federal pardons, and that's sort of what we're seeing here.
Do we know anything about this new prosecutor taking over for Willis?
I do not, and this is all breaking very quickly, and I haven't looked a ton into his background other than the fact he's a Georgia prosecutor.
That's all we know.
Yeah.
How do you expect the Trump administration, to proceed now?
Yeah, I would think they would still revive the arguments that came up over the course of the last several years, which is that he is the president of the United States. Presidents, as the Supreme Court has said, are immune from prosecution for a host of conduct related to their work in office, even when sometimes that conduct is personal. They will, I would think, make the argument that, look, this is once again reviving another investigation into the president of the United States and his conduct before that should not proceed. Also, the fact that he's a sitting president now being prosecuted, they would say, look, maybe you could make an argument for prosecuting him in 2029, but there's no reason why a president should be sitting for interviews and depositions and providing evidence while he's trying to run the country. That's their argument. I'm not weighing in on it. That's just what I think they'll say.
So on that point, realistically, will the Trump administration, or the president himself for that matter, view any prosecutor as fair and impartial in this case?
I don't think so. Not in this case when he is being prosecuted. And again, a lot of this comes out of the Constitution. The president is the one role in the United States that only one person can hold at a time. It's not like even the Supreme Court, where if you take somebody out, there's still 8 of them that can still do it. The argument will be that no president can ever sit for investigation or prosecution because he has a unique job. That you're going to hear that again probably very soon when they move to either dismiss or take some action with respect to this case.
All right, Elliot, stay with us. You'll join us next hour as well on this breaking news.
And still ahead, the Defense Department launching a new operation aimed at targeting, quote, narco-terrorists. We're going to bring you all the latest details.
And then next, we're going to speak to the New Jersey Attorney General after he announces a major mafia-linking sports betting bust, this time involving college athletes. You're in the situation.
The discharge petition. What does that tell you?
Well, because, there's actually been a bipartisan push here. Let's remember that it was Representatives Thomas Massey of Kentucky, a Republican, and Ro Khanna of California, a Democrat, who jointly corralled all the votes they needed to get a floor vote over the head of Mike Johnson, the Speaker of the House, who has done everything he can to stonewall this. And that's why you're going to get a floor vote on the House next week. And I think representatives in their districts are close to their voters. They understand that this is an issue the voters care about, because the story that Donald Trump and his allies told was that Jeffrey Epstein had documents and the goods on elite people and elite institutions that were smothering the needs of average voters. And when Trump got into the White House, he was going to allow transparency to shine on all of this, and now he's not. And the question remains, why not?
Lisa, let me ask you about something else that caught our eye this week in the last couple of days. Deputy Attorney General Todd Blanche got into a bit of a social media skirmish and admitted in this post he was responding to George Conway, who, of course, has been very critical of the Trump administration and is a very high-profile lawyer himself. He admits here that the Justice Department didn't have these materials that have been released now by the House Oversight Committee when he went and interviewed Ghislaine Maxwell, Jeffrey Epstein's convicted co-conspirator, in prison earlier this year. Your reaction to that?
That doesn't surprise me. First of all, it's not entirely clear from reading the transcripts of Todd Blanche's interview with Ghislaine Maxwell what documents he reviewed. It was not a document-heavy interview. In fact, it was light on documents entirely, right? Normally, if you take a deposition, you're showing people communications in which they were involved, and you're asking them to explain now, from the benefit of hindsight, what were you thinking at the time? What was that person communicating to you? How did you understand that? None of that took place. It was all very high level and really designed for the purpose of that one statement where Ghislaine Maxwell says, I never saw Trump do anything inappropriate. He always was a gentleman to me. That is all Todd Blanche wanted from those 2 days. Now, when he says the Department of Justice didn't have these emails, I actually believe that. And that's because at the time that DOJ conducted its investigation, it did 2 raids, one of Jeffrey Epstein's home in New York, one of his home in the Virgin Islands. They took a bunch of stuff, including electronics, including, for example, multiple iPads. But we don't know if they got the full totality of his emails or if they even knew all of the private email accounts that he used. I think one of the reasons that the Trump administration is locked down in the way that they are about the discharge petition is because they don't know to what extent the universe of DOJ's materials and the universe that the estate now controls are overlapping or not. And it doesn't shock me that many of these communications were themselves a surprise to the White House.
Well, I think it does open more doors for questioning whether they even were aware of all the information that's out there and if that could then warrant reopening some kind of investigation into the Epstein Files. Let's put a pin in this for now. Lisa, stay with me. Von Hilliard, Tim O'Brien, thank you. We have some other legal news that's breaking this morning involving a Trump criminal case that many people probably assumed had fizzled out. A new prosecutor has been assigned to that sweeping 2020 election interference case in Georgia. That was the case brought by Fani Willis. You'll recall it was one of those. He challenged her appointment or her involvement in this case. It resulted in Trump's mugshot being taken and eventually stalled after Willis was disqualified from the case. MSNBC legal affairs reporter Fallon Gallagher is tracking this. Lisa Rubin standing by as well. Fallon, first, bring us what we know about what has unfolded, who's this new prosecutor, and why is this happening now?
Yeah, Anna, there's a new prosecutor in this case. His name is Peter Skandalakis, and he is the head of a nonpartisan prosecutorial council that was tasked with finding a replacement for Fani Willis. Now, as you mentioned, many people probably thought that this case had gone away. The 2 other cases brought by Jack Smith that were completely dismissed. Now, this case has been kind of sitting on ice for a while because Fani Willis was disqualified. There were a number of hearings. You might remember those. They were all on camera. They were quite dramatic. But Fani Willis had been disqualified for the, quote, appearance of impropriety after it was revealed that she had been having a romantic relationship with Nathan Wade, who was the special top prosecutor working with her to prosecute this case against the president. So she was disqualified. The case was kind of put on ice, and this council had been looking for a replacement prosecutor. Now, what's interesting here is that it sounds like they had interviewed a number of possible candidates and nobody either wanted the job or was qualified for the job. And so now this guy, who is the head of this council, is taking over the case himself. Now, it's interesting because the case might not move forward against President Trump while he is serving as president, but there are still 14 other people who face criminal charges in this case, including people like Rudy Giuliani and Mark Meadows. Anna?
Lisa, what more can you tell us about how this might move forward and what we know about this new prosecutor?
Well, let's remember, today was the deadline for that prosecuting council to appoint somebody to replace Fani Willis. There are some people who thought today would come and go without anybody being replaced. So the fact that Peter Skandalakis appointed himself is itself sort of forward propulsion. But remember also that earlier this week, President Trump pardoned at least 77 people, all of whom were defendants in one or more of the so-called fake electors cases brought by various states. Many of those people are defendants in this ongoing lawsuit. Now, it's sort of axiomatic that a president can't pardon somebody for what is a state crime. But we know that their theory now going forward, based on a memo that Ed Martin, Department of Justice prosecutor, prepared and released, is that these are quintessentially federal matters and that no state, whether it's Georgia or anyone else, has any right to investigate or prosecute alleged interference with a federal proceeding. So if and when this case moves forward, that's the defense we should expect to see advanced by these folks, saying this is a federal matter, we were pardoned for it.
But this was a state RICO case.
Correct.
And it was an unusual method of prosecution, although a RICO case that was sprawling had been brought by the Fani Willis office previously. So do you expect this new prosecutor just to pick up where Fani Willis had left off, essentially?
I don't know. I expect that probably the judge here, Scott McAfee, will convene a hearing now that there is a prosecutor and that they will discuss sort of the scheduling going forward. One of those things at the scheduling conference will be, how do you pick up? Are there motions that folks want to make that weren't made previously? There was a whole slew of pretrial motions before Fani Willis was ever disqualified and before we went down into that sort of sideshow of issues involving Nathan Wade and Fani Willis. The other thing I want to flag, though, is that Fani Willis herself is said to be under investigation by this Trump administration for expenditures having to deal with out-of-state travel with her staff. So again, how that becomes a piece of this, if at all, what staff can be used going forward, because it wasn't just a disqualification of Fani Willis, it was a disqualification of the entire office. So how Peter Skandalakis is going to do this going forward remains to be seen, Anna.
Okay, more to come on this. Thank you so much, Lisa Rubin, Fallon Gallagher. Appreciate you both. Lisa, stay close because it's a big day of legal news. Up next, Trump's targets. California Democratic Congressman Eric Swalwell is just the latest public critic of the president to now face a criminal probe. Plus, court orders, a big ruling in Chicago impacting immigrants and ICE agents. And later, New Hampshire Senator Jeanne Shaheen,
We were able to develop information from port activities, and yes, the mob remains active, and we are continuously combating them and making sure that they cannot get footholds into our industries. And from there, we didn't just stop at sort of the low-level offenders, as you noted, to significant players in the Lucchese crime family. This was a family affair. Little Joe Perna is alleged here as the leader. His son was involved. His wife and his ex-wife was allegedly involved in this. So the important thing that we do is we build big cases and we hold anyone accountable, no matter how big or how powerful you are, again, to the fullest extent of the law.
But can you walk us through specifically what they were allegedly doing in this sports betting ring and how they were able to bring in these, allegedly bring in these athletes?
Yeah, so they were recruiting specifically agents and sub-agents, bookies effectively, who were younger and had credibility with other students. And then essentially they were acting as old school bookies. They were taking bets either through electronic payments or otherwise, and running a multi-million-dollar illegal sports ring using students and student athletes as their agents.
The New Jersey Attorney General Matthew Platkin, thanks so much for joining us.
Thanks so much for having me.
All right, coming up, a CNN exclusive interview, the president of Venezuela's message to President Trump as tensions rise between the two countries. We'll be back.
Prime Minister premieres Sunday at 9 on CNN and next day on the CNN app.
Another federal investigation of a prominent Trump critic appears to be taking shape. Congressman Eric Swalwell is now the latest Democrat fending off mortgage fraud allegations launched by President Trump's top housing official, Bill Pulte. Now, Pulte has reportedly made a criminal referral to the Justice Department, a tactic he's already used on at least 3 other people that President Trump considers foes. Pulte's clear pattern has turned the relatively low-profile Federal Housing Finance Agency into a household name in the Trump retribution era. We began with MSNBC congressional reporter Michael Msnow on the Hill. Our senior legal reporter Lisa Rubin's back with us in New York. Reuters White House correspondent Jeff Mason is joining us, and former federal prosecutor Paul Butler. Lisa, I'm coming back to you. What more do we know about this referral and the allegations?
So we have not obtained the referral yet, Anna, and MSNBC has not independently confirmed that the referral was made. That having been said, we understand that the referral deals with a residence that Swalwell and his family own in Washington, D.C., and for which they obtained something called a primary residence mortgage. That is sort of at the heart of what we understand the investigation into Senator Adam Schiff, also a Californian, is about. I want to flag for our viewers that having a primary residence mortgage usually means you've made a representation to your lender that the house that you are borrowing money for is, in fact, your primary residence. And I think that what they are trying to get at is how could Congressman Swalwell have a primary residence in Washington if he also owns a home in California in his congressional district that itself should be his primary residence? Our friend Jake Sherman pointed out yesterday on Katie Tur's show that if that's the gravamen of the investigation here, then there are lots of members of Congress that should be ducking and covering right now on both sides of the aisle, because living arrangements for members of Congress are complicated. Not everybody owns two properties. Not everyone can afford to own two properties. And some people rent, for example, either in their home district or in Washington, D.C. But what do you do, for example, if you own a property in California and you move your family to Washington, D.C.? For many members with young families, that is a choice that they make, particularly when their congressional districts are further away, that their family should live in Washington, their kids should go to school full time. You can see how in those circumstances, it's possible to think, I don't really have a secondary residence. Instead, I have two primary residences. So we don't know exactly what the allegations are yet. But we also know Bill Pulte has been sort of the engine of many of these investigations into people who are considered enemies of President Trump, Adam Schiff being one of them, but also Letitia James, who is now being prosecuted for a different form of mortgage fraud in the Eastern District of Virginia. And there may be others as well, Anna.
Michael, how is Swalwell responding to this?
Yeah, Anna, Swalwell has been very defiant in the wake of these allegations. He's, of course, a frequent foe and critic of President Trump. They oftentimes find each other at odds. In a statement that was put out very shortly after news broke of these allegations, he said he was surprised that it took so long for President Trump to go after him. He also said he does not plan to stop criticizing President Trump, adding as well that he will not drop his lawsuit that he filed against the president back in 2021 that accuses Trump and some of his allies of inciting the January 6th attack on the Capitol. He then went on MSNBC and very clearly, categorically denied these allegations. Take a listen.
These allegations are false, just like the allegations against Adam Schiff are false, and Letitia James are false, and Lisa Cook are false. And a spoiler alert for you, there will be allegations next week against somebody that'll be false. No, the Justice Department has not said anything, just through leaked media reporting. But this is really about Donald Trump going after his political enemies. And no one has been a more vocal critic than me. And as you mentioned, I have one of the only remaining lawsuits against Donald Trump for his role on January 6th.
Anna, certainly this will continue to be a developing story up here on Capitol Hill when we see Swalwell next week, as he mentioned that he hasn't yet heard from the Department of Justice. But as he mentioned, as Lisa's mentioned, he is just the latest member of Congress to have these sort of allegations against him, Adam Schiff being the first.
Yeah, Adam Schiff, Letitia James, Lisa Cook, now Eric Swalwell. So, Paul, realistically, can the administration argue that this isn't politically motivated?
They can't, not when Trump's labor secretary, his environmental protection agency administrator, and his transportation secretary all have mortgages on more than one home that they claim as their primary residence. So, Anna, it's clear that people's mortgage applications are being weaponized. What's the point? Is it to get Trump's political enemies locked up, which it seems that they're trying to do with Letitia James? Or is the point to get people to be investigated but not charged, like Senator Schiff and Lisa Cook, to make them spend hundreds of thousands of dollars in legal fees? Or is it to send a message to members of Congress that if you come after Trump, he will sic his investigators and prosecutors after you? A lot of people in Congress have residences in D.C. where they work. and homes in the district that they represent. That could be mortgages with refinancing, lots of paperwork. And if they get on the wrong side of Trump, they now have to worry that Trump will sic these federal agents and prosecutors against them to go over all of their paperwork with a fine-tooth comb.
Jeff, Bill Pulte is, again, the director of the Federal Housing Finance Agency. Most people in most administrations wouldn't really know who has this role, but he has been the driving force behind these mortgage fraud investigations. What more can you tell us about him and the kind of influence he has in this Trump administration?
Well, I think number one, he's using tools in the toolbox that he has that have proven to be quite effective, at least in starting these charges or kicking these charges off. No doubt because of a mandate that the president has set, which is to go after some of these political foes. He, however, is not uncontroversial. And one of the things that he proposed just, I think, this week, at least that's taken off this week, with this idea of a 50-year mortgage, which the president also spoke about shortly after hearing about it from Pulte, drew a lot of criticism, and he has drawn criticism himself directly for not having the experience or sort of expertise for this job. But I think broadly, just stepping back and looking at the politics of it all, this is all in line with the president's view and with the president's strategy of using every single part of his administration to achieve his aims, be it political or policy related. And a big chunk of the political goals that the president has made clear he wants to pursue is retribution. And if that's using something as in the weeds as housing policy or looking at these mortgages, then that's what he's going to do. And Bill Pulte has been leading that charge.
While Pulte was handling some of these referrals, there's new reporting that claims there were serious concerns about ethics and his handling of confidential information. Lisa, walk us through that.
So there's been, Anna, as you mentioned, a series of public reports. Let's start with the fact that Bill Pulte has an employee who is very close to him, a head of marketing, who has been reported to be looking into compiling information and then sharing it with a competitor. That person was chastised for doing so by the general counsel. The general counsel then got involved, the CEO and many other executives of Fannie Mae. The CEO, the general counsel, and others are now out of jobs for having the audacity to take on this ally of Pulte, who, again, allegedly shared confidential and proprietary information about mortgages with a competitor. At the same time, we also know that a number of folks internally have been fired because they were looking into how Bill Pulte has himself taken confidential mortgage information and used it as the basis for criminal referrals. Procedurally, that information is supposed to only come from the Office of Inspector General at the FHFA. But Bill Pulte has been basically pulling that information himself and somehow sharing it with the Department of Justice. So there were folks at the agency that he oversees in their ethics unit looking into his own use and that of close allies of his into that. All of those people are now gone as well. We are seeing a hollowing out of career expert officials at the FHFA that is reminiscent of some of what we've seen at the Department of Justice. And it's no surprise in some ways, because among that reporting is a report that Ed Martin, who himself is the special attorney at DOJ in charge of investigating mortgage fraud, came to the FHFA with Bill Pulte amidst this clearinghouse.
Paul, if the data in any of these mortgage-related probes was obtained improperly, would that then be kind of a fatal flaw for any subsequent indictment or trial?
It would be up to the judge. Certainly the defense attorneys would move to dismiss the evidence on the grounds that they were illegally obtained, but those motions often fail. But look, Anna, in federal agencies that have access to personal records, like mortgages and taxes, there are lots of rules about when employees can look up those records. The idea is you don't want nosy people looking up Beyonce's taxes or LeBron James' mortgage. So these rules apply to the boss, like Bill Pulte, but because he's the boss, as Anna said, we heard from Lisa, he ordered his employees to turn over these records. Get this, though, the person who would investigate him to see whether he broke any rules is the inspector general of his agency. Well, Trump just fired that inspector general. And that's not the first time. Trump has fired 24 inspectors general since January. The president doesn't have legal authority to fire inspectors general, but he's done it anyway.
Jeff, it seems like so often we are reporting on how people who aren't doing what the president wants get axed. And yet they still have to prove these cases. If it does result in an indictment, if it does go to trial, if they lose, is just inflicting as much damage as they can still a victory for them in some way?
That's a good question. I think that anyone who works for President Trump knows that there's a potential axe hanging over their heads if they aren't able to produce on what he's wanting. On the other hand, I think one of the main differences between Trump 2.0, this administration, and Trump 1.0 is that there's been quite a bit of stability. He's obviously had a little bit of turnover. His national security advisor was fired and became the U.S. ambassador to the UN. And there have been some other lower-level departures, but in general, he has stuck with the people around him this time around, and I think that's.
Let me just interrupt for a second, though, Jeff, because I know people at home are probably yelling at you, saying, "What stability? He's fired thousands of career civil servants who, work in the prosecutors' offices, who work in all these other agencies." But you're talking about stability among his cabinet, among the leadership that he's installed, right?
I am, and I appreciate that interruption. But yes, the focus that I was talking about is the people around him. Which, if you think back to the first term, he went through multiple chiefs of staff, he went through multiple secretaries of state, he went through a bunch of turnover with his top advisors. So I'm not saying that stability is the adjective that applies to the Trump administration, but to the first 10 months of his second term, I think it probably does apply to his attitude towards the people who are most closely around him, his inner and outer circle, and that includes people at the White House and in some of these agencies.
He's picked a lot of yes men and women. Thank you so much, Jeff Mason, Michael Schnell, Lisa Rubin, and Paul Butler. Appreciate you all. Up next, Democratic Senator Jeanne Shaheen is going to join us. She was one of the Democrats who helped negotiate that deal to end the shutdown. Does she have any regrets?
A modicum of an Air Force, not much. It would be taken out immediately. What they do have is some Russian-supplied, pretty sophisticated anti-ship weapon systems. The Navy has a tiered system to protect itself. So again, I think that can be obviated and addressed. But in terms of military on military, the Venezuelans have no match. This is really about Maduro trying to maintain control inside his population. For those that oppose him, he wants to make sure the message is, don't come up with any good ideas you think to overthrow me, because I've got a military internally that'll take care of that. And then for the domestic folks who don't want Maduro, he's sending an equally strong message, which is, I'm here, we're capable, and we're aware of what's going on.
All right, retired Major General James Spider Marks, thanks very much for joining us.
Thank you so much.
Appreciate
it. Overnight, Russian strikes hammered Kyiv, killing at least 6 people and hurting dozens more, including children. Several buildings across the city sustained heavy damage, and Ukraine also launched its own attacks using long-range missiles targeting an oil depot right near the Black Sea. At the same time, Russia says it stopped a Ukrainian plot to kill a top Kremlin official. Now, CNN has not verified those claims. Ukraine denies those accusations. And coming up, we're going to be joined by the Ukrainian ambassador to the U.S. She's going to talk to us about the latest tensions between her country and Russia. That'll be the next hour right here in the Situation Room.
And just ahead, the Deputy Attorney General accused them of hiding documents from law enforcement.
Welcome back. Things in Washington are starting to get back to normal after the longest shutdown in U.S. history. Federal workers are back at work. Museums and national parks are open again to visitors, and full SNAP payments for millions set to go out again. But the political fallout of how it ended is still roiling the Democratic Party. The decision by 8 Democrats to reopen the government without firm guarantees on health care subsidies has ignited frustration across the party, from progressives to frontline lawmakers. And joining us now is Democratic Senator Jeanne Shaheen of New Hampshire. She's one of the 8 Democrats who voted with Republicans to reopen the government and was directly involved in shutdown negotiations. Senator Shaheen, first, I have to thank you for your patience with all that breaking news this morning. I know you've been waiting for a while. We really appreciate you doing that and joining us for this conversation. You, of course, have faced, thank you. You've faced a lot of criticism, I know, from Democrats, including from your own family. The New York Times highlighted in a story this week your daughter, Stephanie.
I would disagree with that, Anna, because it wasn't criticism. It was just a disagreement. And anybody who has independent children understand that they have their own minds, and that's true. Why she's going to be a great congresswoman.
Yeah, well, you point that out beautifully, that, yes, there are disagreements, even in families, but I think it also highlights that you weren't, in this case, aligned with much of your party, including people within your family who would oftentimes want to support you and what you are doing. And there are a lot of other Democrats we've heard who obviously are angry. Given the backlash that has come from members of your party, family and otherwise, do you have any regrets for your vote and for hammering out this particular deal?
Absolutely not. My only regret is that Donald Trump and the Republican majorities in the House and Senate haven't understood how important it is that we address the high costs of health insurance. They have taken every opportunity to try and undercut the Affordable Care Act. That's what this issue is about. So we need to stay united. This government shutdown has put front and center before the American people the importance of affordable health care. That's what we need to continue to rally around and stay behind and get done. Because now that the government shutdown is over, what we've heard from the White House, what we've heard from the majorities, the Republican majorities, is that they understand they've got to come to the table and help get some relief for the 20 million Americans who are seeing their health insurance costs rise.
But no guarantees. They may have acknowledged that this is a problem, but no guarantees.
Well, there are never any guarantees. And unfortunately, in Donald Trump, we have a president who is willing to let Americans suffer indefinitely. I'm glad I stood up for the 42 million Americans, 75,000 of them who are in New Hampshire, who need food assistance. I'm proud I stood up for the 2 million federal workers who want to go back to work and want to get paid, including National Guard in New Hampshire, including our workers at the Portsmouth Naval Shipyard. I'm proud that I helped to end the chaos in the skies and make sure our air traffic controllers can get paid, and that we can relieve some of the stress on them so they don't have to work 2 jobs in order to support their families. So we have a lot of work to do. That's right. But as Democrats, we need to stay united and remember who the problem is. The problem is Donald Trump and the Republican majorities, and we need to stay focused on them.
The reality is millions of Americans are still worried about skyrocketing health care premiums. And while Leader Thune, agreed to a vote, let me just finish, because I think it's important to put all of it in context, right? You did get an agreement for a vote in the Senate on those ACA subsidies. So that was progress. But House Speaker Johnson hasn't committed to anything. Senator, we reported on one family of 4 earlier this week whose monthly premium could jump from $1,200 to more than $3,500. Again, a month without these subsidies. Can you guarantee those hikes won't happen?
Well, it's outrageous. And that's why we need to get Republicans to the table, and that's what we need to work on. Listen, I understand as well as anybody the importance of these premium tax credits to help families. I'm the one who introduced the legislation in 2019, got it into the COVID package in the early 2000s, got it into the Inflation Reduction Act. It's the first legislation I introduced this year. I've worked 3 times to try and get a unanimous consent motion past the Republicans in the Senate to get this passed. We need to do this for all the people who are suffering. And Donald Trump would be well advised to recognize that 76% of the people who benefit from these premium tax credits are people who live in red states who voted for him. The Republican House should understand that 57% of these premium tax credit holders are in states that are Republican congressional districts. So there is a lot of incentive. We're already talking to Republicans and Democrats in the House, to Republicans and Democrats in the Senate about how to move legislation forward to provide some relief for people.
There's also been a lot of backlash over the Senate Republicans, squeezing in at the last minute this provision in the deal to reopen the shutdown that allows senators to sue the government because their phone records were subpoenaed as part of the January 6th investigation. I know you've already said you didn't know that was added to the bill. How did that end up in the bill? And would you have voted differently if you had known?
I think you need to ask leadership about those provisions in the Senate, and certainly we need to work to get them out.
Meantime, federal workers are soon going to have their first paycheck in over a month, which I know is really important to you. DHS Secretary Kristi Noem, and to them, exactly, to the country. Kristi Noem, though, announced yesterday that the administration is going to pay TSA agents $10,000 bonuses for working during the shutdown. What do you make of that move, and any idea where that money's coming from?
I don't have any idea, Anna, and usually, as you know, and most Americans know, that when Congress passes legislation, the money is supposed to be used for the purposes that are designated by Congress. And so I don't know where she's getting the money. I think it's wonderful that we provide additional help for federal workers, but we need to do it. If we're going to provide help for workers in TSA, then we need to provide that help for air traffic controllers, for other federal workers. One of the benefits of this package that we supported is that it requires the administration to bring back those employees who were let go during the shutdown. It provides for their back pay, and it provides protections for them going forward. So I think Congress needs to ask the Secretary of Homeland Security where she's getting that money and what she's taking it from, and why she's not providing it to all federal employees who are within her department.
Senator Jeanne Shaheen, I appreciate your time. Thank you so much for joining us. Up next, hundreds of detainees set to be released. I'll speak to a leader in the fight for immigrant rights in Illinois after a critical legal ruling in Chicago. And next hour, California dreaming. The DOJ now trying to get the new congressional map approved by California voters thrown out.
It's really just the public concern that they're not getting straight answers from these folks, including on social media.
Yeah, and how does the fact that the estate is now saying that, look, we've complied with all of the documents requests and pushing back against Todd Blanche's claims feed into all of this?
I think it does. America loves a conspiracy theory, and as does the internet, and it fuels it. And I think the mere fact that there is ambiguity or uncertainty, or at least not a lining up or a meeting of the minds of what's been provided or not, absolutely fuels public suspicion around this. Who knows? I spoke pretty forcefully a second ago. Who knows if the public would have been satisfied several months ago? But they could have. Some of this could have been contained. It's so much more a PR concern than a legal one right now.
Elliot, I want to ask you about the Trump Justice Department opening up a mortgage fraud probe into Congressman Eric Swalwell right now. He's the fourth Democratic official to face fraud allegations in recent months. If the Trump Justice Department...
In a private email written in 2018. The email is part of a trove of over 20,000 pages of documents released Wednesday by the House Oversight Committee, raising new questions about President Trump's ties to the deceased convicted sex offender. Earlier on Wednesday morning, Democrats on the committee preemptively released 3 emails from the files. In one email from 2019, Epstein wrote that Trump, quote, knew about the girls. In another email from 2011, Epstein described Trump as the, quote, dog that hasn't barked, noting that Trump had, quote, spent hours at my house with Virginia, a reference to the late Virginia Giuffre, who accused Epstein of grooming and sexually trafficking her beginning when she was 16 years old. The Democrats released a version of the email with Virginia's name redacted, but an unredacted version of the email was later released.
In a recently published memoir, Virginia Giuffre writes she feared she would, quote, die a sex slave at the hands of Jeffrey Epstein. But in the book, Giuffre does not allege wrongdoing by Trump. She worked at Trump's Mar-a-Lago before being recruited by Ghislaine Maxwell. In another email from 2015, Epstein asked a reporter at the New York Times, quote, would you like photos of Donald and girls in bikinis in my kitchen? We're joined now by Spencer Kuven, who represents several survivors of abuse by Jeffrey Epstein and Ghislaine Maxwell. We have a lot to ask you about in very small amount of time. Start off by responding to these emails that have been released. And now the latest news that the House is going to vote on releasing the whole trove of Epstein-Maxwell documents by next week, not in December, as was previously thought. Do you think Johnson get one of the Republican Congress members who are calling for the release to flip?
Well, first of all, thank you for having me on. And I'm not sure exactly what they're going to actually do. But remember, this is just one procedural hurdle, right? The House has to pass this discharge petition. And then once the discharge petition has now gone through, they've got to vote on the floor. Then once that vote occurs, it's got to flip over to the Senate. And then the president will then have to sign off on releasing this information. So there are times or periods in this process where it can get hung up and we never end up seeing this information. Also, remember that the most important thing that we want to see and that the general public should be shown isn't necessarily the documents. It's the videotapes and photographs that were taken into custody by the FBI at the various different homes of Jeffrey Epstein. We're talking about his homes down in the Virgin Islands, here in Palm Beach, where I'm at, as well as his home in Manhattan. That's the information that's going to speak 1,000 words. That's what the general public needs to see.
Where are those videotapes? And does the Epstein estate have what many feel the government should have taken?
Well, I believe the videotapes are in the custody of the FBI because, remember, he was arrested at Teterboro Airport, and he never had an opportunity to get back to his mansion post-arrest. And the FBI then executed a search warrant on his home in Manhattan. That is where we believe that a wealth of video evidence was maintained. In addition to that, they then executed a warrant in the Virgin Islands. We know that after his arrest here in Palm Beach, or actually I should say just before his arrest, he had a team of people that took hard drives away from the home here in Palm Beach and secreted them away. We always understood as attorneys back then in 2007, 2008, when I was representing these young victims, that they had likely taken that evidence off to the Virgin Islands to secure it. So they've got 500 gigabytes of information that needs to be released.
Well, Spencer, you had already seen the emails that were released yesterday, including the one that disclosed that Trump spent hours with Virginia. They were under a protective order by a federal judge, which is why you couldn't disclose them. Now, if you could talk about when you first saw them, what most surprised you, and whether other lawyers or yourself have seen any of the photographic or video evidence that you say is so crucial.
Well, I can't talk about things that might be protected by, still protected by protective order. What I can tell you generally is that the emails were part of a litigation that occurred down in the Southern District of Florida. And when that disclosure occurred, remember that our advocacy as attorneys was on behalf of victims to try to upend or turn over the sweetheart deal that the U.S. government had executed with Jeffrey Epstein because they failed to keep the victims informed of that deal. I only learned of it on behalf of my clients because an informant told me that I needed to rush to court because this secret deal was about to be entered. So a lot of that information was turned over in that litigation. We weren't really focused on Trump at the time, so it wasn't the focus of our investigation or our litigation back then. We were just tangentially aware that they existed. Now that the focus is on this material, I can say that there is a lot more to come, and I can say that the FBI does have more information that needs to be released.
Well, the FBI has also interviewed, as you've said, over 40 girls, some just 14 years old. So where are those interviews, and is there any likelihood that the content of those interviews would be released?
Well, first and foremost, I would wish that the identities of those individual victims continue to be protected. Some of them, like a lot of my clients, nearly all of my clients, have remained anonymous even to this day, almost 20 years later. No one has the identities or names of my clients that I have kept confidential. So I would hope that that remains to be the case. But the contents of those interviews, in other words, what they said and who they were with and who they told police they had been with and been traded to at Epstein's mansion, we believe that that information should be made public, along with the videotapes and photographs that we believe the FBI has in their custody.
And Spencer, your response to the latest revelation that Ghislaine Maxwell, aside from getting very special treatment at the minimum security jail that she was sent to in Texas, that has shocked many because sex abusers are not supposed to be in these minimum security facilities, is applying for a commutation of her 20-year sentence?
Well, of course she is. I'm not shocked or surprised at any action that Ghislaine Maxwell takes. She's a convicted liar and sex predator. So I don't believe anything she does, and nothing she does shocks me after 20 years. She will do anything she can to trade on information that she believes she has. We've seen that now in some of the emails that this duo of Epstein and Maxwell were all about leverage. They were trying to use leverage when discussing President Trump. They continued to use leverage when they were discussing Andrew in England and other notorious individuals. And I believe that that deal was struck to transfer her to this prison before she ever spoke to the Department of Justice. Because why would a criminal, and why would an attorney advising a criminal to tell them, speak to the Department of Justice when you have a pending appeal? It's asinine. It makes no sense whatsoever, unless there was a deal that was struck beforehand that said, listen, if you talk and keep Trump's name out of this, we'll transfer you to a nicer prison.
Spencer Kuvin, we want to thank you so much for being with us. Lawyer for a number of survivors of Jeffrey Epstein and Ghislaine Maxwell's abuse. Thanks for watching Democracy Now! On YouTube. Subscribe.
8,000 documents from Jeffrey Epstein's estate have been released for all to see, and we've been through them. They feature Donald Trump, the former Prince Andrew, Peter Mandelson, and of course Epstein's girlfriend and co-conspirator Ghislaine Maxwell, along with many other people. Here's a deep dive into Epstein's world. Let's begin with Donald Trump. The emails relating to him span about a decade, up until just before Epstein's death in jail in 2019. It's important to stress that there are no emails from or to Donald Trump. They're all from Epstein to others. They give a remarkable new insight. Epstein claiming a closeness with Trump, who, remember, is on record as saying he disassociated himself with Epstein years earlier, in the early 2000s. Let's begin in 2011, 5 years before Trump was elected president for the first time. I want to show you this one from Jeffrey Epstein to his girlfriend and co-conspirator Ghislaine Maxwell in April 2011. It was written not long after he'd been released from house arrest for having solicited prostitution from a minor, and he was trying to rebuild his reputation. Epstein says to Maxwell, "I want you to realize that the dog that hasn't barked is Trump. Virginia spent hours at my house with him. He has never once been mentioned. Police chief, etc. I'm 75% there." Now, Virginia is Virginia Giuffre, one of Epstein's victims and the woman in that now infamous photo with Andrew Mountbatten Windsor. We'll come to him later because there are new emails between Andrew and Epstein. Now, Giuffre, who took her own life earlier this year, never accused Trump of any wrongdoing, but Epstein is alleging that Trump and she spent hours together at Epstein's house. The White House has hit back. Listen briefly to Trump's press secretary on this.
Ms. Giuffre maintained, and God rest her soul, that she maintained that there was nothing inappropriate she ever witnessed, that President Trump was always extremely professional and friendly to her.
Now, as the years pass, the tone of the emails evolves. We get a glimpse into how the nature of the relationship, from Epstein's perspective, appears to have changed. How Epstein began to believe that he had a hold over Trump. These were the years leading up to Trump's election victory in 2016. Now, December 2015, this is just under a year before Trump won the 2016 election, and he is gaining momentum as a candidate. On the 12th of December 2015, Epstein sent this email to a reporter from the New York Times. Subject line, Trump. "Have them ask my houseman about Donald almost walking into the door, leaving his nose print on the glass as young women were swimming in the pool, and he was so focused he walked straight into the door. It's not clear when Epstein was alleging that incident had happened, but the email suggests two things. First, a hint at the close association between Epstein and Trump, historically at least, and second, that Epstein is seeking at this point to discredit Trump. In the same email exchange with the reporter, Epstein says, "Would you like photos of Donald and girls in bikinis in my kitchen?" Now, as time passes, towards the cusp of Trump winning the White House in 2016, we get a new perspective on what Epstein was thinking and writing about Trump while he was on the rise to the presidency. There are swathes of emails between Epstein and the writer Michael Wolff. They detail how Epstein was being advised how he could use his relationship with Trump to his own benefit. Look at this one from Michael Wolff to Epstein in December 2015. Subject, heads up. Wolff writes about Trump, "If he says he hadn't been on the plane or to the house, then that gives you a valuable PR and political currency. You can hang him in a way that potentially generates a positive benefit for you. Or, if it really looks like he could win, you could save him, generating a debt." And then Michael Wolff again to Epstein in October 2016, just before the presidential election. He suggests Epstein could finish Trump. Subject line, "Now could be the time." Wolff writes, "There is an opportunity to come forward this week and talk about Trump in such a way that could garner you great sympathy and help finish him. Interested?" Trump wins the election in November 2016. Look at this. Was Epstein in Trump Tower just days after? On the 13th of November 2016, a woman called Linda Stone asks Epstein, "You still in Paris?" Half an hour later, he replies, "Trump Tower." It's not clear who, if anyone, he was meeting at Trump Tower. If he was actually there, there are public areas within the building. Remember, Trump says he cut ties with Epstein many years earlier. We asked the White House if Jeffrey Epstein was in Trump Tower on that date. In response, White House spokeswoman Abigail Jackson said, "These emails prove literally nothing." Epstein continues to write about and ridicule Trump during his first term in office. Take this from Epstein to Larry Summers in 2017. Summers was Treasury Secretary under Bill Clinton. Epstein writes, "Your world does not understand how dumb he really is. He will blame everyone around him for bad results." Remember, we don't know the full context of these emails. Here's another from March 2018. And in this case, the name of the person emailing Epstein has been redacted. The anonymous person says, "It will all blow over. They're really just trying to take down Trump and doing whatever they can to do that." Epstein replies, "Yes, thanks. It's wild, because I am the one able to take him down."
EVE Online is a vast universe.
Now, this email has caught a lot of attention. It's from January 2019, in the middle of Trump's first term as president. It's about membership at Trump's Mar-a-Lago club in Florida. Redacted worked at Mar-a-Lago. She was the one that accused Prince Andrew, Epstein wrote. Trump said, "He asked me to resign. Never remember, ever." Of course, he knew about the girls, as he asked Ghislaine to stop. So what does all this mean? Well, the redacted name is Virginia Giuffre. We know that she worked at Mar-a-Lago, and she is the woman who accused Prince Andrew. The meaning isn't quite clear. We don't know precisely what Epstein is claiming when he says Trump knew about the girls. In response to the release of the documents, the White House said the fact remains that President Trump kicked Jeffrey Epstein out of his club decades ago for being a creep to his female employees, including Giuffre. Remember, too, that Trump is on record as saying that he cut his relationship with Epstein because he thought he was poaching his female employees.
We took people that worked for me, and I told him don't do it anymore, and he did it, and I said, stay the hell out of here.
Now let's focus on the man formerly known as Prince Andrew. In his infamous Newsnight interview in November 2019, Andrew claimed that after he and Epstein met in New York in 2010, he was never in contact with him. But these emails between the pair are from the following year, March 2011. Remember, this is the time just after Epstein had been released from house arrest for having solicited prostitution from a minor. 3 months earlier, that now infamous photo of Epstein and Andrew was taken in New York's Central Park. Andrew's involvement with Epstein was headlined globally. And we now have an insight into Andrew's state of mind at the time. The email chain includes startling allegations. The Mail on Sunday had emailed asking for responses to their story, which alleged sordid sexual encounters involving Andrew, Maxwell, the former Israeli Prime Minister Ehud Barak, and others. We've asked Mr. Barak for a response to the mention of his name. The emails get forwarded a few times, including from Ghislaine Maxwell to Epstein, and then from Epstein to an account labelled The Duke. Andrew appears to reply, "What? I don't know any of this. How are you responding?" Epstein replies, and it's full of typos. "Just got it 2 minutes ago. I asked lawyers to send a letter. Not sure. It is so salacious and ridiculous. I'm not sure how to respond. The only person she didn't have sex with was Elvis." The subject title of this email is Ghislaine Maxwell. Then Andrew says, "Please make sure that every statement or legal letter states clearly that I am not involved and that I knew and know nothing about any of these allegations. I can't take any more of this, my end." Later that same year, 2011, emails show that Epstein was talking about Prince Andrew. He says Buckingham Palace would love it if Virginia Giuffre was proven to be a liar. Epstein emails a publicist. "I think a great opportunity has arisen." He goes on, "The girl who accused Prince Andrew can easily be proven to be a liar. I think Buckingham Palace would love it. You should task someone to investigate the girl that has caused the Queen's son all this aggro. I promise you, she is a fraud. You and I will be able to go to Ascot for the rest of our lives." But in trying to discredit Virginia Giuffre, Epstein appears to confirm that the photo of her with Andrew is real. Andrew has previously claimed that the photo could have been doctored. "Yes, she was on my plane, and yes, she had her picture taken with Andrew, as many of my employees have. I have never misled you. This girl is a total liar." Let's skip forward now to January 2015. Epstein and Maxwell appearing to be in private brainstorming responses to each other to a legal and media storm. They're firefighting, and the email exchanges are written in haste. Maxwell to Epstein, the 10th of January 2015. "I have to distance myself from you in statement 2, and they need me to say I was not aware of massage with Andrew in my house. These things, they have to stay, along with meeting, redacted, and rebutting these allegations. I need it ASAP." Finally, look at this. When President Trump was on a state visit to the UK in 2019, Steve Bannon is emailing Epstein. Bannon, remember, is the former White House strategist fired by Trump earlier in his first term. He and Epstein are commenting on Trump's physical proximity to Andrew in video of the state visit. "Prince Andrew and Trump today. Too funny," Epstein wrote. Then, "Recall Prince Andrew's accuser came out of Mar-a-Lago." Bannon replied, "I can't believe nobody is making you the connective tissue." This is just days before Epstein's final arrest. Andrew Mountbatten Windsor continues to face scrutiny over his friendship with Epstein, but has always vigorously denied all of the accusations against him in relation to the deceased paedophile.
This is Expedience Gym Monster 2. And if you're not familiar with Expedience Gym Monster, let's first talk about what it is. It's a smart magnetic cable fitness device. So in turn, it's a squat rack, a cable machine, a pulley.
Now, Peter Mandelson. He is the man who lost his job as UK ambassador here in Washington because of his links with Epstein, revealed in a previous tranche of documents. We now know that he had contact with Epstein as late as 2016, according to these new emails. This is much later than known before now. Previously released emails show they maintained contact until 2010. A direct exchange between Epstein and Mandelson on the 6th of November 2016. The email is started by Epstein. 63 years old, you made it. Mandelson replies, "Just. I've decided to extend my life by spending more of it in the US." Later in the chain, Donald in White House, will he get there? Mandelson writes. And then what appears to be a separate thought, yes, without Andrew, it would not have gone nuclear. It's not clear quite what Mandelson is referring to. Mandelson then goes on to reference his relationship with his own husband. Epstein writes to Mandelson, "I was right in your staying with Ronaldo." Ronaldo is Mandelson's husband. Mandelson replies, "Did you advise me to stay with R? Such a handful, but loyal and never embarrassing." And so it's clear that privately, Epstein and Mandelson are discussing Mandelson's husband, and this is an indication of just how close they were as recently as 2016. Now, I've messaged Lord Mandelson asking for comment. He's seen the message, but has not responded. Mandelson spoke to Sky in May this year, expressing regret.
My knowledge of him is something that I regret. I wish I'd never met him in the first place.
So there are thousands, tens of thousands of documents in the release. There are also hundreds, if not thousands, more names referenced. A mind-boggling range of presidents, prime ministers, princes, high-powered financiers, and powerful business people. Of course, association does not make them guilty of anything. These emails were initially released by the Democrats here in the United States on the House committee. The committee then released all 20,000 documents. It is a political battle ongoing, and the walls appear to be closing in on Donald Trump's White House.
I appreciate you. I'll talk to you soon. God bless.
Say that together too many times. Todd Blanche met twice with Ghislaine Maxwell, the convicted sex trafficker and, of course, accomplice of Jeffrey Epstein's. And in those interviews, Maxwell put distance between Trump and Epstein, saying that she did not recall ever seeing Trump in Epstein's home. Except in Epstein's own email to Maxwell back in 2011, released just yesterday by Democrats on the House Oversight Committee, Epstein admitted that Trump did indeed visit one of his homes. Now, maybe she didn't see, but Maxwell's response to Epstein to that email was, quote, "I have been thinking about that." Really makes you wonder about just how honest Ghislaine Maxwell was in those interviews, and why Todd Blanche never brought up this piece of evidence in his interviews with Maxwell in the first place. Well, today Todd Blanche admitted on Twitter that despite being the number 2 person at the Justice Department, he did not have that evidence at the time. Posting, quote, "When I interviewed Maxwell, law enforcement didn't have the materials Epstein's estate hid for years and only just provided to Congress." And let's just say I have a lot of questions about that admission. Joining me now is Senator Adam Schiff, who sits on the Judiciary Committee, and I'm betting has a lot of questions about that admission, too. Let's just start there. I mean, in that post, Todd Blanche confirmed something that I think, even in this age of a lot of stunning things, should be stunning, that he didn't have all the information when he interviewed Maxwell. What did that tell you?
Well, this goes to a central question about that whole interview, and that is, why didn't Todd Blanche actually bring someone familiar with the case, one of the prosecutors who had handled the case, that would know the facts, that would know when Maxwell was lying, when she was telling the truth? Now, one of those prosecutors was James Comey's daughter, who was fired from the Justice Department. But he brought no one who knew the facts and no one who could press Maxwell, test whether she's telling the truth. That, of course, was deliberate, because getting the truth from Maxwell was not the object. Getting an exonerating statement, exonerating testimony for Donald Trump was the object. And, of course, it appears that that resulted in Maxwell being transferred to this, minimum security, concierge service providing institution that is not suitable for sex offenders. So on the one hand, it raises profound questions about why Blanche wasn't prepared and didn't know the facts. But more than that, it really underscores what Amanda said, and that is, we need a real investigation here. If they didn't have the emails from the estate, it's because Kash Patel didn't ask for them, didn't subpoena them, didn't want them. I think we see in these emails that are now dribbling out just why Bondi and Patel don't want to release what they already have and don't want to do the thorough investigation that was apparently never done by the government.
I have so many questions for you about this trove of emails, which I'm sure you haven't read all 23,000 pages. But I know we're living in a time where the consequences that should happen don't always happen. We obviously can't unwind and go back in time and have Todd Blanche bring someone with him. As you said, he didn't intend to do that clearly. Ghislaine Maxwell, as you said, was transferred to a more minimum security prison where she's apparently playing with puppies and taking yoga classes. What should happen? You said an investigation should happen. In normal times, obviously, she should be transferred back, right? What else should happen given these revelations from these emails that she seemed to have lied multiple times?
Well, we should be doing oversight in Congress. Republicans should be helping to do that oversight to find out who made the decision to transfer her to this, sort of cushy prison. Who made that call? You know, when I asked Kash Patel about it in the Judiciary Committee, he claimed that it was the Bureau of Prisons, and the Bureau of Prisons made that decision on their own. He knew nothing about it. The Justice Department wasn't involved somehow. That was the import of his testimony. That just doesn't pass the credibility test. So, number one, we need to do oversight in Congress. But number two, the Justice Department needs to do a real investigation. They need to release publicly what they have. These emails have already shed, I think, some significant light. I was really struck by something Donald Trump said over the summer when he acknowledged having a falling out with Epstein because Epstein was taking girls from Mar-a-Lago. And I remember asking myself, what did he think Epstein was doing with those girls? And now we see one of those emails that just came out makes reference to this when Epstein, I think, is telling Maxwell or telling someone else in those emails, well, of course he knew. That's why there was essentially this dispute over taking girls from Donald Trump or from Mar-a-Lago. So these emails are already shedding light. The White House is engaged in its usual sort of blitzkrieg of denials. But there needs to be a real investigation here, a serious investigation.
There's so many emails, to your point, and I think reporters and committee members and staff are still going through them. I want to ask you about one of them specifically that I don't think I paid as much attention to yesterday, but I did today, and I think a lot of people did. It's the one where Jeffrey Epstein says about Donald Trump, I am the one able to take him down. What do you think that means?
Well, I think the import is I know information on Donald Trump that the public hasn't seen yet, and it is very incriminating. This is, I think, where he refers also to it as the dog that hasn't barked. That is the information that isn't out there yet. So clearly he believes he has something that is valuable to him as potential extortion of Donald Trump, but also would be extremely damaging to the president. And probably a thorough investigation would reveal just what that is. If Epstein put it in writing to someone else or if there was physical evidence of that in the files.
If the House votes to release the Epstein files next week, and it sure looks like it will, Donald Trump will have to count on Republicans in the Senate to stop this from getting to his desk. And even then, he might have some problems.
I just don't think this issue is going to go away until that issue is addressed and answered to the American people's satisfaction. Yeah. And I may end up with a sombrero on my head for saying that, but that's the way I see it.
That's, of course, a reference to the video, the AI video that Trump did about Hakeem Jeffries. But back with me, of course, is Senator Adam Schiff. Now, it looks like, let's just talk about the mechanics of this, because it looks like there could be a lot of Republican support on the petition in the House. I'm going to talk to your California colleague, Ro Khanna, about that in just a moment. But what are you expecting to happen when it lands in the Senate?
Well, I would expect they will do everything they can to fight that passing in the Senate. And we're going to do what we can to make sure that that gets taken up. There are a number of tactics we can use in the Senate to compel a vote. We have compelled votes, for example, in the Judiciary Committee about releasing the Epstein files. Those votes didn't succeed, but I'm glad to hear Senator Kennedy, who sits on the Judiciary Committee with me, make comments like that, because it does show that some of the Republicans want this information to be public. They want to know who is responsible, who should be held accountable. So we will explore whatever methods, whatever tools we have to force votes on this. It is simply not going to go away. And I think the more the White House lets this drip, 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 the more they're going to wish they had just, released things and stopped this campaign of, fighting disclosure, denial, followed by implausible denial, followed by implausible denial.
So there's, just to put a fine point on that, there's not a discharge petition process in the Senate, but there are ways to compel or to push for votes even without Senate Majority Leader Thune, who seems not inclined to do it at this moment. Is that right? Through a committee process?
Well, you can often force votes on things in committee. Forcing votes on the floor is a little bit more challenging. Some things are privileged, and we'll certainly explore whether there's anything privileged that can be made to fit disclosure of the Epstein files. But even if there isn't, there are ways to both negotiate. Okay, we're going to not put up a fight on this if you don't put up a fight on voting for that, or at least allowing us a vote on that. There is leverage that we can use. Now, as we have seen, the leverage is limited. We are very much in the minority. But we can make it very difficult in the Senate for Senate Republicans if they continue to go along with the president's concealment campaign.
And people can advocate to their senators at the same time, too. Let me ask you, obviously, there's a hurdle to get this through, which is why I wanted to talk to you about this. Let's just talk about if this were to become law, because I think it's important for people to understand what it could do. The House Oversight Committee is, of course, with bipartisan support, issued subpoenas to get information. We've seen information released. The information that came out yesterday came from the Epstein estate. There's more coming on that front. If this were to pass, this discharge petition, if it were to pass and become law, what's the difference between the information that could come from this and the information that the committee is getting through the subpoena process?
Well, it would mean that the whole...
Imagine being able to build an app with your name on it, just by thinking about it. Meet Base 44.
What a dark, dark show. Just a grim show we have to navigate through today. Even the stories that aren't about what we just talked about relate to some terrible people. On screen, you're seeing Elon Musk's father, Errol, or as we call him here, Errol. And Errol, who we recently talked about this New York Times reporting in relation to, titled Elon Musk's father accused of child sexual abuse of his own children or stepchildren. He did an interview with CNN and says that, you know how population as the country has gotten more diverse, at some point in time you could have white people not in the majority, not like over 50% of the country being white. There would still be a huge portion, 40-something%, but at some date, 2 decades from now or something, you're going to have 40-something% white instead of 50-something or 60-something. And there's a lot of fear-mongering in the MAGA world about that and what that means, and also running with conspiracies about this being purposeful to eliminate white people. And look at me. Look at me. I'm white. But even I, the most famous white person, some people say. Some people have said it. Hasn't been me. That's what I get called around my house when I'm alone. Can say they're being ludicrous. Do I want to be eliminated? No, not personally. But do I think that natural population shifts and normal demographic changes are going to cause the downfall of a... Stop. Just stop. But he says... You're going to turn us, if you let us not be a majority white country, back into a jungle. This is Elon Musk's dad. But don't look into the hand gesture too much, because that was just an accident. I'm serious. But this is what his dad's saying. Same dad, I'll remind you, who, as he denies South African apartheid, or as Trump would put it, South American apartheid. He denies it when he is the guy who said his black servants were friends with Elon, which proves Elon's not racist. So just click the subscribe button. Here we go.
The big concern at the moment, and why I think South Africa is a big talking point in the US right now, is America in the next 20 years will become, for the first time in its history, a minority white country.
Well, that will be a very, very bad thing to happen. You want to see the US go down? Why? Oh, you don't like cars and electric cars, and you don't like technology, or what is it? You want to go back to the jungle, or?
If the US becomes a minority...
Hey. CNN reporter. Why were you not reacting stronger to that? Do you not want technology? Do you want to go back to the jungle? Because, of course, we can't have electric cars if there is statistically less white people. Even though the advancement of electric cars have happened in a very diverse country with very diverse people working on those electric cars. What a psycho.
White country.
Yes.
So there's Latinas, there's blacks, there's people from all different races make up the majority, and then, you know, it could be 48% white people. Do you really think the US is doomed if it goes under?
Yes, it goes under then.
Seriously?
Yes, of course. You see, if you take South Africa, we have a small white population that projects European culture, or what we learned from Europe.
And oppressed millions of black people.
No.
For decades.
How do you oppress? We gave them work. We fed them. They grew from a tiny little group into a massive group. That's not oppression. That's feeding them. Do you understand? You only grow big if you get fed. You only start at 800 and become 50 million if you get fed. We fed them. For crying out loud. You know, enough with this nonsense.
But so you understand, because the black population was so oppressed under apartheid.
Well, you know,
because of course we can't have electric cars if there is statistically less white people. Even though the advancement of electric cars have happened in a very diverse country with very diverse people working on those electric cars. What a psycho.
White country.
Yes.
So there's Latinas, there's blacks, there's people from all different races make up the majority, and then, you know, it could be 48% white people. Do you really think the US is doomed if it goes under?
Yes, it goes under then.
Seriously?
Yes, of course. You see, if you take South Africa, we have a small white population that projects European culture, or what we learned from Europe.
And oppressed millions of black people.
No.
For decades.
How do you oppress? We gave them work. We fed them. They grew from a tiny little group into a massive group. That's not oppression. That's feeding them. Do you understand? You only grow big if you get fed. You only start at 800 and become 50 million if you get fed. We fed them. For crying out loud. You know, enough with this nonsense.
But so you understand, because the black population was so oppressed under apartheid.
Well, we never saw this oppression you're talking about.
You never saw it?
No, I never saw it.
Yeah, because you're white.
No, I was never oppressed. I was never oppressed during apartheid. I was never oppressed. I fed my servants. I fed them. That's his dad. His dad. So remember, I know that most of you don't need this. What's so sinister about these folks is America, if they had gotten their way, never would have become the empire, the powerhouse, the cultural force, the multicultural democracy.
It's so easy to become a podcaster with Riverside. You just need a concept and a way to record it. Here's how it works.
Shining city on a that it became if these folks had their way. We have, just remember that as all sorts of different groups have immigrated here and convergences of identities have happened, etc., and people have been humping each other too between races, right? That's important to note. We love interracial humping here at the show. That's a stance that we have. Cole's uncomfortable. I'm trying to figure out how to make this very dark story fun. I'm sorry, it's hard. We've also seen the American, hold your take for a second, American prosperity, average American worker productivity skyrocket. Then, because of failures in public policy, we've allowed income inequality to get out of control. We've allowed the systems to be rigged against many of those average workers of all different identity groups. But the ability for us to be productive and innovative has advanced even as we've become more diverse. So clearly that little theory there that will go back in time is wildly, I stay away from this term because people thought it got overused, but I think here it applies. Can we say racist? Is it crazy to call someone racist? Oh, in this case, Tucker, can I use the R word there, Tucker? I think this applies. And the data of our productivity, innovation, economic output contradicts completely what he's saying. So just to take any emotion out of it, that's the case. And then because of failures in public policy and people like his son lobbying against better policies, we haven't distributed that wealth properly enough, and communities have been fractured a lot because of failures in policy. But the might of America has only been strengthened. Does that mean that a common American culture that in many ways is defined by our multiculturalism, but that we all align on certain principles, that that's irrelevant? No, absolutely not. It's just not a matter of race. It's a matter of what we all, as Americans, dedicate ourselves to, which principles we want to align on, and that being our common culture and our common patriotism. But to be so obviously racist and also just simple-minded and pitiful that you think the color of your skin is what defines American greatness is honestly just sad. And you raised, since she was 4, your stepdaughter, and then you impregnated her when she was an adult. I don't want to be a part of that culture, Mr. E-roll. Look at this. You remember this? A bunch of allegations of sexual abuse against children, his children. And then the undeniable one that he doesn't even deny is he had a child, at least one, with the woman who was once the girl that he became the stepfather of when she was 4. So I don't want, whatever that is. And also, I hate to pull like the, can you look up if, I can do it. You're not even American, E-roll. That's right. Can I say it here? Is it racist if I say it here? So E-roll, go back to where you came from. That's right. I said it. Don't come here and spew your racist nonsense. Because my American culture, that is multicultural, that has a convergence of beautiful identities, that doesn't ignore the importance of a shared dedication to principles that defines our culture, but celebrates our connection to each other despite identity differences in our backgrounds. And our American culture doesn't like people who sexually abuse their stepchildren. So I don't want you here. I never say that phrase, but I don't want you here. I want you out. So don't come into our country, our American country, and tell us what we have to do. Don't come into our country and spew white supremacy, which is what that is.
Elon Musk gave these back-to-back gestures that people are saying mimicked a Nazi salute. You see it there. Elon Musk has not directly addressed this, but he has appeared to edit out that gesture from the video that he posted on X, the platform he, of course, owns. Help us understand what transpired.
Thank you.
Oh, careful. Careful with that salute.
It wasn't even like a subtle, like a wave, like one of these, like a...
It's okay, it's good to be proud of German culture, German values, and not to lose that in some sort of multiculturalism that dilutes everything.
That's what a Nazi would say.
We don't want Italy as a culture to disappear. We don't want France as a culture to disappear. I think we have to have maintain the sort of reasonable cultural identity of the various countries. Or they simply will not be those countries.
Aber der ist wahrscheinlich für Sie auch Nazi. Hm? Nazis, 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 lauter Nazi.
USA, 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 USA. Ah! Yes.
No, dog. No, this is the Charlie Chaplin mustache.
Not sure if you saw the news, but Fox News is claiming President Trump is declining in the polls. And President Trump responded and says Fox News polls can't be trusted.
Hey, so what the fuck was that?
I mean, we all know what that actually was. But
Elon Musk gave these back-to-back gestures that people are saying mimicked a Nazi salute. You see it there. Elon Musk has not directly addressed this, but he has appeared to edit out that gesture from the video that he posted on X, the platform he, of course, owns. Help us understand what transpired.
Thank you.
oh, careful. Careful with that salute.
It wasn't even like a subtle, like a wave, like one of these, like a.
It's okay. It's good to be proud of German culture, German values, and not to lose that in some sort of multiculturalism that dilutes everything.
That's what a Nazi would say.
We don't want Italy as a culture to disappear. We don't want France as a culture to disappear. I think we have to maintain the sort of reasonable cultural identity of the various countries. Or they simply will not be those countries.
Aber der ist wahrscheinlich für Sie auch ein Nazi. Nazis, 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 lauter Nazis.
USA, 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 USA. Ah! Yes.
No, dog. No, this is the Charlie Chaplin mustache.
Hey, so what the fuck was that? I mean, we all know what that actually was, but there are a lot of people online, from Elon Musk simps to professional headline writers for major newspapers, insisting that it was something else entirely. A mysterious gesture, or just what autistic people do, which I can't even begin to pass the ableism of saying that autistic people are just biologically predisposed to seek heiling, as if we could have just stopped World War II if we just replaced all of the Germans' machine guns with fidget spinners or something.
Sorry, I was stimming.
Besides the people just flat out in denial because they've decided that don't believe the evidence of your own eyes and ears was in fact not an incredibly on-the-nose line from George Orwell's 1984, but actually just words to live by, inspiration, hashtag just girly things. And of course, the editors at the New York Times, the BBC, and the Daily Mail, who were terrified of upsetting the richest man on earth, and are filled to the brim with conservative bootlickers whose one job is to make sure that they don't upset too many millionaires by reporting too many inconvenient facts. On top of all those people, you have the people who think they found the world's most ill-timed gotcha. It's not a Sieg Heil, you see. It's a Roman salute.
Well, that's all right then.
Gee, I wonder what the Roman salute is another name for. And wouldn't you know it, I'm perfectly placed to debunk this ridiculous argument along with all the other ones, because I am standing right here in the city where the Roman salute made its way from anachronistic depictions of ancient Roman art to being the greeting of choice by fascists. This is Rijeka in northwest Croatia, or as the fascists would have you call it, that is, by its Italian name, Fiume. I am in Rijeka in Croatia, or as the nuncio would have you believe it to be called, a Fiume. This city is the birthplace of, among other things, the torpedo, so that's okay, and the Roman salute, the idea of black shirts, the balcony address, and basically all of the aesthetics of fascism were invented here by Gabriele D'Annunzio during his little proto-fascist experiment, and later basically plagiarized by Mussolini, and then plagiarized again by Adolf Hitler, who then added a sprinkle of Germanness and the myth of multiple thousand years of history for a country that had been around for about 200. And wouldn't you know it, not only was the person who invaded this city and tried to create the world's first fascist state here, the one that popularized the Roman salute as a greeting among fascists, but he's also partially responsible for the myths around it, that being that it was a greeting used in ancient Rome. There is no historical evidence for this. The first use of this greeting and the continued use of this greeting are one and the same. The Roman salute is the Sieg Heil. It is a salute designed to be used by fascists to signal to other fascists that they're fascists. And with that in mind, what could this possibly be?
Nazis, 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 lauter Nazi.
So let's talk about why Elon Musk, the richest man in the world, was doing the fascist salute, instead of playing Path of Exile like he was supposed to be. You were logged on, Elon. You were dungeon crawling, Elon. So why were you at the inauguration visibly tripping off your gourd on ketamine, being so obnoxious you got Baron Trump looking at you like Fade Ralpher, and staring at Jeff Bezos' girlfriend's tits? Were you playing Path of Exile on your Neuralink? Is that what this head movement means?
Yes.
Hello, I'm Bob Kitchen. I'm the IRC's Vice President of Emergency Programs. Right now I'm standing outside Al-Aqsa Hospital. Over the last few days, I've witnessed truly unprecedented humanitarian needs. Fighting and indiscriminate bombing have forced more than 1 million people to flee.
Elon Musk is the grandson of members of the Canadian Nazi Party on his mother's side, and apartheid dipshits on his father's side.
Her parents came to South Africa from Canada because they sympathized with the Afrikaner government. They used to support Hitler and all that sort of stuff. But they didn't know, obviously, I don't think they knew what the Nazis were doing. But they in Canada, they were in the German party in Canada. And they sympathized with the Germans.
Yeah.
And as a white South African soon-to-be billionaire with an abusive father and the emotional maturity of a syphilitic snail, he was born cursed to be one of the most racist pieces of shit ever to walk the earth. This billionaire boor has ever since made it his life's mission to overcompensate for his childhood of his father agreeing that he deserved to be bullied, looking like a reject from Alvin and the Chipmunks, and presumably having a penis as withered and rotten as his heart, by exploiting as many people as possible, racking up lawsuit after lawsuit for everything from blocking unions to cutting corners to making cars that explode to get a little extra profit to recreating segregation in his factories. What a guy! Not content with having ruined the lives of the millions of people it takes to become a billionaire, however, Musk, following his daughter coming out as trans and him getting super ultra mega divorced, has decided to make it his life's new mission to install fascist governments in every country in the world.
I'm very excited for the AfD, and I think you are really the best hope for Germany.
But Musk's intervention in European politics is causing widespread consternation. Tonight, the French President Emmanuel Macron is meeting with Sir Keir Starmer at Chequers, where the subject is certain to come up.
There were rumours the world's richest man might bankroll reform. But Nigel Farage's mistake, it seems, was not backing Elon Musk all the way after his incendiary attacks on the government over historic child grooming scandals.
We don't want Italy as a culture to disappear. We don't want France as a culture to disappear. I think we have to maintain the sort of reasonable cultural identity of the various countries, or they simply will not be those countries.
And it turns out that when you have as much money as he does, that's actually worryingly easy. He bought the US government for less money than he used to buy Twitter. That's pretty depressing, but do you know what's even more depressing? On day one of him essentially having bought the presidency of the most powerful country on the planet, essentially performing a palace coup on the imperial hegemon by slipping it $20, he got on stage and did a Nazi salute. Not once, but twice. That seems like a pretty deliberate choice, eh? Now, this is beyond plausible deniability, so naturally, loads of people are insisting that it's plausibly deniable. So, to entertain all the ways in which people have somehow convinced themselves that this is, 1, not a Sieg Heil like in Hitler times, and 2, okay actually, we're going to go over the arguments in Elon's favour, by which I mean the most unhinged comments on this side of X.com, the everything app. Then we're going to look at the excuses peddled by the mainstream media and even organisations that claim to be anti-fascist and working in the interest of protecting the Jewish people, like the ADL, who produced the most limp-dicked response to this I've seen since I literally got my penis chopped off. And then we're going to explain why it's not plausible that Elon was just doing an I open my heart to you salute that has never existed before he did this and will continue to not exist because it's not a thing. On top of this, why Elon didn't do a Nazi salute because he has autism, because most autistic people, believe it or not, aren't Nazis. Why it's a Roman salute isn't an excuse because the Roman salute, 1, doesn't exist out of fascist symbolism, and 2, because they're the same fucking thing. And then we're going to try and make sense of why anyone would possibly try to deny any of this, when it's plainly fucking obvious what's happening here. I'm Bridget Empire, science and culture correspondent for the Daily Telegraph, and here are some extremely normal opinions from the most gruntled and hinged people on Elon Musk's increasingly far-right internet. Ladies, gentlemen, and envies, I give you the first group of responders to the Roman salute video, the commenters in denial, or to give them a catchier name, the Delulu Bros.
Roman salutes have always been a thing in anime.
That's why you wackos will continue losing. America has rejected the demonic lies you opened the door to for the past 8 years.
Grow up, bedwetter.
You do know he's Jewish, right? What? No, he isn't. I genuinely can't tell if this commenter is being anti-Semitic or is just stupid. They love twisting everything out of context and placing evil on things.
Leftist propagandists will stop at nothing. This time around, they aren't getting away with it.
They are dishonest hacks. When you remove context to sell propaganda, you are the bad guys.
Stop this nonsense. Elon did not make a Nazi salute. He sent his heart to the audience. Are you gonna accuse every police officer sitting in an intersection, stopping the cars coming from the front of a Nazi salute? We have enough real Nazis to fight. Elon Musk is not one of them.
Thank you. They were just looking for the little small things to create their false narrative.
No one is buying this regardation anymore. Her wave is not allowed. Nervously walks up to the mic. I think it's correct that Elon is a strange guy who hulked out in a strange moment, ... But he very probably did not intentionally do the Nazi salute. Elon is already incredibly awkward. Now couple that with the adrenaline and euphoria he was feeling today.
False accusations of Nazism are incredibly harmful during a time when the mainstream media is letting real Nazis, brackets, Hamas, have the mic without question.
That's right. People fighting back against genocide, they're the real Nazis. The people doing Nazi salutes, they're cool and normal. And you can trust this opinion, because it's from the same person who called Greta Thunberg anti-Semitic for having a stuffed toy, and thought a free parking sign was hate speech.
This is why CNN is failing.
And X is the single strongest news source on the planet.
Is adding chicken broth to dog food actually dangerous?
So, Rob, what do you feed your dogs?
You know, I used to think that I was making my dogs...
Lots of people are in denial about this obvious Sieg Heil. There are lots of different reasons people give for them being in denial, but ultimately they are all excuses. Excuses that come back to not wanting to accept that the richest man on the planet got on the biggest stage he's ever been on, stood behind the seal of the President of the United States, essentially the head of the global capitalist order, and openly did not 1, but 2 Nazi salutes, thinking he was being subtle by saying, "My heart goes out to you," before doing those. Not 1, but 2 Nazi salutes. Elon Musk is not a subtle man, however, and anyone who's telling you that he wasn't giving a Nazi salute, but was doing a "my heart goes out to you" salute, should be asked one very simple question. What's a "my heart goes out to you" salute? I've never heard of that in my life, and I've been alive for 33 years. Should I not have come across this apparently incredibly well-known gesture? If I were to tell someone, "my heart goes out to you," which I wouldn't because people don't tend to say that outside of forlorn letters to faraway friends that are grieving a loved one or something similarly obscure, I can think of a couple gestures I might do. I might make a heart gesture with my hands. I might put my hand on my heart. I might reach out for their hand. What I wouldn't do is a fucking Nazi salute. And do you know what? I'm seeing far too many people thinking that they found a way to weasel out of coming to terms with the fact that this is exactly what Elon Musk did by showing videos of, for example, Adolf Hitler doing the Nazi salute, because he doesn't slap his heart like Elon does in the video. The problem with this is, it's been 100 fucking years, And as you can see in these videos from American History X, a movie about a neo-Nazi, and from an actual neo-Nazi rally in America, neo-Nazis, particularly those in the United States of America, wouldn't you know it, do the Nazi salute in exactly the same way that Elon Musk does. They slap their palm to their chest and throw their hand out. This is a Nazi salute. For those of you still in denial about this, I present to you video evidence of how Elon Musk actually gestures when he says his heart goes out to people normally, because a video of that actually exists. With this in mind, the "My heart goes out to you" line was obvious cover for a salute he had previously planned, thinking he was being super cool and subtle. I mean, this is a guy who thinks he's the smartest man on earth, so he probably figured no one would notice, because he actually has the emotional intelligence of a slice of stale toast.
When did you get a German Shepherd? What, Adolf here? See, what? Not Adolf Hitler, okay? Adolf Marx, Harpo. I love the Marx Brothers. Why are you busting my chops? You know this.
Of course, in the days since, after it became clear that people had, 1, noticed what he had very clearly done, and 2, were not exactly happy about it, Elon took to the social media app that he bought and subsequently completely ruined to not deny it, but instead whine about how everyone kept calling him a Nazi, while hinting that he did in fact do it to be a troll, which is the sort of logic you'd use if you were 5 years old. Which makes sense, because it's about the level of Elon Musk's sense of humour. Some of his very gruntled and very hinged remarks include this ancient meme of a bird not doing what it's told, ooh, such a naughty child, with this extremely boomer caption, I just can't help it, cry laughing emoji, and crying on the internet that his Twitter feed wasn't just constant praise of him anymore, which, to be fair, is basically the reason he bought the platform in the first place. As Musk himself put it, if I see one more damn Nazi salute in my feed, I'm gonna lose my mind, weird face emoji. This algorithm sucks. After which Elon then reverted to the most common modern fascist method, practiced by Elon Musk's friend and another Elon Musk defender, Benjamin Netanyahu, the "but Hamas" deflection. As if, even if Hamas were what Elon seems to think they are, that would make him doing repeated Nazi salutes any less bad. But no, apparently, according to Elon, the only people that could possibly think that are the radical leftists that are really upset they had to take time out of their busy day praising Hamas to call me a Nazi. And having clearly humiliated himself and exposed himself as a fascist, he was made to look even further guilty by having this generation's Adolf Hitler, famous Holocaust revisionist, and far-right fascist, currently wanted by the International Criminal Court for crimes against humanity, including that big one that starts with a G, that was famously done by a certain Adolf Hitler of Hitler salute fame, Benjamin Netanyahu. The famous war criminal and mass murderer said this in Elon Musk's defense.
Elon Musk is being falsely smeared. Elon is a great friend of Israel. He visited after the October 7th massacre, in which Hamas terrorists committed the worst atrocity against the Jewish people since the Holocaust. He has since repeatedly and forcefully supported Israel's right to defend itself against genocidal terrorists and regimes who seek to annihilate the one and only Jewish state. I thank him for this.
So this is a new one. What Netanyahu is saying here, if I'm getting this right, is Elon Musk can't be a Nazi because he actively supports an ongoing genocide. Not the greatest argument in your favour as someone who wants to not be perceived as a fascist, I've gotta be honest. The closest thing I saw to Musk trying to edge towards a denial while being legally not in denial was this hefty huff of copium.
It was astonishing how insanely hard legacy media tried to cancel me for saying my heart goes out to you and moving my hand from my heart to the audience. In the end, this deception will just be another nail in the coffin of social media.
Of course, this non-apology was not helped by the fact that he was constantly tweeting pictures of people like Arnold Schwarzenegger with his arm raised taken out of context, and that he spent about a paragraph making a bunch of awful Nazi puns, which just made him look like he was enjoying the speculation, when clearly he was actually mad as fuck, and desperately wanted to make it look like he wasn't in fact mad, presumably before turning into a corn cob. Now, another cohort of defenders have decided to make an even lazier argument in Elon's defense, by showing stills of politicians from the Democratic Party apparently doing this same salute. And I don't know how to say this without sounding incredibly patronizing, but there's a reason they're sharing the photographs and not the videos. If you play the video of, say, Kamala Harris supposedly doing the Nazi salute, it's very clear that the photo caught her mid-hand movement. Whereas if you watch the full video of the Elon Musk Nazi salute, you see him hit the very pose, beat for beat, twice. In fact, it's worse than that, Because not only did he do the Nazi salute twice, while obviously off his fucking tits on ketamine, thinking he was being super clever, and smirking as he said, "My heart goes out to you," as if that was just a thing people did, he then paraphrased a Nazi slogan. In his words,
"It is thanks to you that the future of civilization is assured."
What did he mean by that? I'll leave you to be the judge of that. But given he prefaced it by doing two incredibly blatant Sieg Heils, I would hazard a guess that he meant the American voter had secured the existence of our people and a future for white children. Is that far-fetched? Well, it's much less far-fetched than insisting that he did not hit the Nazi salute twice. I've seen that shit from multiple angles. Even people in the crowd clocked that it was a Nazi salute. As you can hear in this video.
Oh, careful. Careful with that salute. Yeah.
And you can add all of the context you like to it, because this is in context. Speaking of context, here are a select few tweets from the people I'm affectionately calling context bros, explaining how Elon Musk was doing the "my heart goes out to you" salute, a real thing that definitely exists, and not something that I heard of for the very first time in the wake of the richest man in the world doing a Nazi salute at a Nazi rally for the fascist president of the United States before carrying out the biggest mass deportation in American history, which is, if you know your history, Nazi shit. What? Why have you snipped the part where he says "my heart goes out to you"? He literally said "my heart goes out to you." That was the intent of the gesture. Try not to be this way. It's completely dishonest. You're such a fraud. Show the whole clip.
Elon's genuine moment, while the left creates fake narratives. Pathetic! American flag emoji.
Did you accidentally post this deceptive edit because you had to hurry back to molesting toddlers?
"My heart goes out to you" is what he said right after.
Play the full clip, dude. This BS is exactly why y'all lost, and will continue to lose. He's giving his heart out to the people, FFS facepalm emoji.
Do you not have ears, too? It's him giving his whole heart. This isn't something very hard to understand.
He said he was throwing his heart! Then he touched his heart and threw his arm out. Not a salute of any kind. Making stuff up, I think, is called misinformation.
I see you took out the words he was saying, which would have given actual context. Cry laughing emoji.
This is so dishonest. Democratic propagandists purposely cut the part which showed Elon saying "my heart goes out to you," which is what Elon was expressing. Here's the full clip. They still don't get why they lost.
Classic media spin. They conveniently omit context to fit their narrative. Here's the truth in full view. Elon's empathy was clear. Maybe if they focused on facts, they'd understand the real story. Yawning emoji. In all seriousness, you're arsler beyond belief if you think Elon Musk did a Nazi salute here. It's clear he's gesturing from the heart, deeply moved by emotion and gratitude. He literally says, "Thank you. My heart goes out to you." These next few were in response to an actual historian of fascism, confirming that it is a Nazi salute. And as you can imagine, the fact that they had to argue with an actual expert did not make the context bros any more normal. Case in point.
"My heart goes out to you." Clutches heart and gestures fling it into the crowd. Historian, it's a fascist salute. Historian should understand the importance of getting the context right. This is clearly not meant to be the Nazi salute.
It was literally a gesture of "my heart goes out to you." Historian of fascism. Eye roll emoji. Get a real job.
If you watch the video, he was thanking the crowd with all his heart and throwing his heart out to them.
He's throwing out love. That's it. End of story.
When Elon placed his hand over his heart and extended his arm and hand as if throwing his heart to the crowd, it can be metaphorically described as him figuratively tossing his passion and dedication out to the audience. This gesture symbolizes sharing his deepest feelings, aspirations, or commitment with the people, suggesting a profound connection or an act of giving his all to them. It's a powerful visual of Elon expressing a sense of unity, trust, or an emotional bond with the crowd, emphasizing his openness and vulnerability in that moment. Have you ever had an emotional and vulnerable moment?
This is how I lowered my car insurance rate by $110. I had no clue.
Yeah, me too. And surprise, surprise, it didn't make me a fucking Nazi. Also, if you were, just for the sake of argument, to become the context bro I'm talking to for a second, making a gesture of "my heart goes out to you," why would you do that with your palm facing down? Are you dropping your heart at their feet? Why is your hand doing that? Are you trying to stab them with your heart before it falls to the floor? Like, there are so many levels to which this doesn't work that it's just astounding. Even like standard liberals on Twitter understand what this salute is, and diagnose the problem too, that people can't accept what it is because they'll have to reckon with what that means. The fact that there is anyone left who can't is just astounding to me. In fact, I'm going to commit an act of heresy here. I'm going to quote a liberal, just to prove that you don't need to be a filthy, dirty socialist like me to understand what's going on here. I've been reflecting on this over the past day or so, and I've come to a realization. Many of my friends on the centre-right who are upset with me for making what I believe to be a very obvious observations aren't necessarily angry at me. They're angry at the implications of what I'm saying. The idea that neo-Nazism has entered the mainstream, potentially influencing the White House, is so alarming and existentially terrifying that it's easier to lash out at the messenger than confront the reality. If they accept this, it meant that the political home they've invested so much of their identity in, the movement they've championed for years, has become something so morally repugnant that accepting it feels like breaking their own brain. The cognitive dissonance is overwhelming. And I think that's exactly it. It's the same thinking that leads people into conspiracy theories. Sometimes it's easier to believe something completely batshit than accept a horrifying truth. Some people find it easier to believe 9/11 happened because George Bush wanted an excuse to invade Iraq, rather than reckon with the horror of American imperialism and the hatred it's brought out in many across the world, especially when they grew up believing that America was the land of the free, and that everyone in the world wanted to be an American. Sometimes the truth hurts so much, and is so fundamentally incompatible with a person's worldview that they would much sooner believe that the earth is flat than believe in the reality happening right in front of them in plain view. Now, aside from the context bros and the people just plainly in denial, there are quite a few people online who, read the Wikipedia page for the Roman Empire and are convinced that they've worked out the daddy of all gotchas, the ultimate foil to any argument that this salute, which Nazis are doing on your screen besides Elon Musk, who is also doing the same salute as said Nazis, is a Nazi salute. Namely, the favourite argument of the Reddit bro. The well actually. Well, actually, it's a Roman salute. Technically, they're two different things. Perhaps Elon Musk is just a scholar of ancient Rome, the same as myself. I've read 3 Wikipedia pages, and now my profile picture is a bust of Augustus. I'm 53 years old, and I've never had sex. Or, as the SPQRaboos would say it,
Cecius Maximus, it's a Roman salute, chill out.
It can be interpreted in so many different ways.
That's the Roman salute that was adopted by the Nazis. Roman. It's a Roman salute.
Bruh! I love Roman Empire a lot, but this will be so out of the context for the next 4 years.
Roman versus Nazi salute, : Roman salute equals extending right arm outward angle, palm facing downward. Nazi salute equals raising right arm at an upward angle, palm facing downwards. What would you say, however, if I were to tell you that the Roman salute is the Nazi salute, and that either way, we don't have proof that the Romans ever used it? It was, in fact, popularized by fascists in the 20th century. Most famously Hitler, yes, but prior to him, Mussolini, and prior to him, the man who Mussolini basically plagiarized the aesthetics of fascism from wholesale, Italian poet, prolific and the man who invaded my city and turned it into the first proto-fascist experiment, Gabriele D'Annunzio.
I'm still here in Rijeka, eating the, of course, traditional food of Croatia, which is, of course, the bakery calzone, the most Balkan food in the world. There he is, proto-fascist boy himself. Hey, we're at the gates of Rijeka, back in the Roman times, when it was Tarsatica. Can you see that? No. At the top, during the coup, there's a 2-headed eagle, and one of the eagle heads was replaced by the Italian flag, which was In poor taste, but a very funny image. I mean, you have to hand it.
Help. Help.
Is Myra buried again? Always.
The Roman salute has its origins in entertainment set in the Roman era, but written in the 19th century onwards. Far from being an actual piece of Roman culture that was brought back by those nostalgic for the days when Italy was an empire that straddled 3 continents, this war cry. However, D'Annunzio's Fiume was not just comic opera. The Comandante issued proclamations, order finally had enough with its rogue Italian sex and the inventor of its plot. In reality, it was already shot, and D'Annunzio had changed the title, some of the names, and rewrote the caption to give it a more dramatic flair. In the movie, the raised arm salute is used by both Romans and Africans as a greeting, inheriting this gesture from the theatre, and since we're talking silent movies, relying on exaggerated gestures to tell the story. 5 years after he invaded the box office, in 1919, D'Annunzio, with a force of approximately 2,000 men, invaded and occupied the city of Rijeka in Yugoslavia, modern Croatia.
And I'm at the port where he was finally kicked out by bombardment by the Italian Navy. And orders from the International Order, which, I mean, not good for humanity, I suppose. Over here, you see the streets, which he coveted so much.
As a long-time border city, at various times part of Italy, Hungary, Austria, Yugoslavia, Croatia, and it had a mixed ethnic population, as did pretty much all of the Balkans, and the Adriatic coast in particular was a reliable mixture of Italians, Croats, and other ethnic groups. But in an age of nationalism, being multicultural was problematic. Gabriele D'Annunzio, following outrage by Italian nationalists at Rijeka's exclusion from the now unified Italy, and in an atmosphere of rising nationalism from Italians within Rijeka, claimed the city of Fiume, as he called it, and ruled it as his own private proto-fascist state. Until Christmas Eve in 1920, when the post-World War I order finally had enough with its rogue Italian sex criminal sitting on land that had been given in international treaties to Yugoslavia, on account of all the, you know, Slavs there. And the Royal Italian Army bombarded the city from the sea, returning it to the people. Well, kind of. While the aesthetics, ideas, and culture of D'Annunzio's Fiume would outlast his occupation by an order of magnitude, that doesn't mean that being part of the proto-fascist city-state was the glorious past that some people would have you believe. Violent street thugs roamed the streets. People were, as you'd expect from fascism, being killed openly for being different. Local Croats suffered constant intimidation. D'Annunzio's followers proclaimed the death penalty for anyone disloyal to the cause of Fiume, causing most prominent Croats to leave. The Croatian population regrouped in the suburb of Sušak, just south of the centre, making the Riječina River the new border, cutting the city in two, the fascist death cult on one side and the local population on the other. For D'Annunzio, the Croats were simply a culturally inferior people who lacked history, and therefore had no real right to rule over the eastern shores of the Adriatic. He also professed the lazy anti-Semitism of the Salon Radical, calling the recently formed League of Nations an institution created to further the interests of international banking Jews. The idea that Italian nationalism would define itself through disdain for others was typically D'Annunzian and typically fascist. Of course, these ideas would spread to one Benito Mussolini. During these short few years that D'Annunzio ruled Rijeka like the little poetry Hitler that he was, he popularized a certain greeting, however, one that he had become intimately familiar with from films of ancient Rome, and his own movie, Cabarilla. Hitler that he was, typically fascist. Institution created no real right to rule over the eastern shores of the Adriatic. He also professed the lazy anti-Semitism of the Salon Radical, calling the recently formed League of Nations an institution created to further the interests of international banking Jews. The idea that Italian nationalism would define itself through disdain for others was typically D'Annunzian and typically fascist. Of course, these ideas interests of international banking this sincerely and can now be more open about what they believe, because they have this new layer of plausible deniability. This might have been what Elon was going for. Maybe he genuinely believed that by saying "my heart goes out to you," only Nazis would notice that he was doing a Nazi salute. But that's not how it went down, because we all know what a Nazi salute looks like, and no one has ever said "my heart goes out to you" followed by a Sieg Heil. That's never happened before. And so we're left with this. There are a lot of people, more than any sane world should have, in denial about the evidence of their lying eyes. We're left with what I'm calling implausible deniability. No longer are the signals for the far right confined to dog whistles, signals that Nazis understand but that can fly under the radar to those who lack the knowledge or right connections to be alert to them. No longer are we hiding behind the "it's just a joke" defense. Still the primary way people get away with far right sentiment in our modern day. To the people who agree, it's serious. To the people who don't, it's just a joke. Why are you taking it seriously? This is a tactic that at least works on some people. No one is buying this but those who cannot handle what it would mean to accept why they are in denial. And what the moral imperatives would be if someone was indeed on stage behind the presidential seal making literal Nazi salutes. Because that calls for taking a stand. And taking a stand is hard. Even for those of us who believe ourselves to have strong moral compasses. Those of us who take pride in ourselves for fighting for what's right, for sticking to our principles. And this is especially hard when the thing you have to take a stand against is the global imperial hegemon. In the days after writing the initial draft of the script, more and more things kept coming out that kept making this story worse. So I imagine that when this video comes out, the situation will have escalated further. As I sat down to finalize the script, for instance, footage emerged of Elon Musk speaking at an AfD rally. AfD, or Alternative for Deutschland, is Germany's far-right party. It is neo-Nazi in all but name, and in that case only because that would be illegal. Following days of condemnation for Sieg Heiling on the stage, as a representative of the new US administration, he made it his business to tell a room full of wannabe brown shirts that they should just forget what the Nazi party did, that it's fine, that we can move past it, it's not your fault, and shots in the face.
Everywhere, where it's just one big sort of soup. You know, we want to have something where it's, you go to different countries and you experience a different culture, and it is unique and special and good. And that the German government takes actions to protect its citizens and make sure that it seeks the health and well-being of the German people. The German people are sort of really an ancient nation, goes back thousands of years. I was even sort of read Julius Caesar's account of first encountering the German tribes in the Gaulic campaigns, and he was like, "Wow, very impressive. These are very, very powerful warriors." I think there's frankly too much of a focus on past guilt, and we need to move beyond that. Children should not be guilty of the sins of their parents, or even let alone their parents, their great-grandparents, maybe even. And we should be optimistic and excited about a future for Germany. That's really my message, is be optimistic, excited, and preserve German culture and protect the German people.
If you are still in denial at this point, you will never be convinced. Also, just for the record, Elon Musk's daughter says that it was a Nazi salute, so that's about as close as we're going to get to confirmation from someone remotely honest who's close to the situation. No matter how many Ben Shapiros you have tweeting pictures of him bringing Musk with him to Auschwitz after he agreed with straight-up Nazi-level anti-Semitism on Twitter to prove that he's not anti-Semitic, but he's doing a Hitler salute, and the only reason you took that picture was because he was being anti-Semitic on the timeline, I'd say make it make sense. But you can't, because we've moved far past plausible deniability. Even after I wrote all this and recorded a bunch of it, he was on a stage with Italian fascists talking about keeping the bloodlines pure of a bunch of European countries. He is a fascist. This was intentional. We have reached the realm of implausible deniability. Denial for the sake of denial. Because the price of acceptance would be admitting that you're siding with Nazis. Or, in the case of those less far right, accepting that there are Nazis out in the open, that it is your moral duty to stop at any cost. How did the war go for your master race? Fled to a bunker and shot in the face. Strung upside down in the public square. Guess you want to end up there. Follow your leader, Nazi scum.